Seeing it's 6 p.m., I'd like to call the November 6th regular meeting of the Kenai City Council order. Would you all please, if you're able to, rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I'd like to welcome everybody here this evening. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel,
Here.
Councilmember Malloy,
Here.
Vice Mayor Navarre,
Here.
Councilmember Naxtet,
Here.
Councilmember Petty,
Here.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Here.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Here.
Mayor Gabriel, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Next up, we have agenda approval. I do have additional meeting or additional material revisions with requested revisions to the agenda packet. Action add item D7, resolution number 2019-75, description memo and maps requested by the city manager. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to approve the agenda with the requested revisions to the agenda and packet listed by the mayor and request unanimous consent.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Unanimous consent is requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Next, we have the consent agenda. Pleasure, council.
I think you got number 4.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right, we do have number 4. Got a new thing on the consent agenda, so I'm just ready to get to it. Next up, we have election of vice mayor, so I'll open the floor at this time for nominations for vice mayor. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, I nominate Bob Malloy for vice mayor.
Second.
Bob Malloy, is there any other nominations from the floor? Seeing none. Do we have to?
No,
We
seeing
didn't have to do
no
a
other
vote?
nominations, then Councilmember Malloy is elected.
Okay, seeing no other nominations, then Councilmember Malloy is elected vice mayor.
Thank you, council.
Congratulations, Vice Mayor. Next, we have consent agenda. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxton.
I move for approval of the consent agenda. Request unanimous consent.
Second.
Are there any amendments? So basically what we're going to do is, there was some discussion about, and just to let everybody know kind of where we're at here, is that this was just approved by unanimous consent, usually without it being read into the record. And with movement towards, reducing some of our advertising, there was, as far as agendas go in the local newspaper, there's a request that we read the consent agenda into the record. So at this time, I would ask for any amendments, and if we do not have any amendments, the clerk will read the agenda items, and then we'll go for public comment, and then after that, we'll approve it based on no objection. So is there any amendments from the body to the consent amendment, or to the consent agenda? Seeing none, clerk, would you please read the consent agenda items?
The items on the consent agenda are the regular meeting minutes of October 16th, 2019, the work session summary of October 16th, 2019, approval of bills to be ratified, approval of purchase orders over $15,000, introduction of ordinance number 3095-2019, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the general fund, police department, and accepting a grant from the Department of Justice for the purchase of ballistic vests, with a hearing on December 4th. Introduction of ordinance number 3096-2019, determining that real property described as Lot 1, Alyeska Subdivision, Part 3, according to plat number 1531, and Lot 1A, Alyeska Subdivision, Part 3, according to plat K1531, city-owned airport land located outside the airport reserved, is not needed for a public purpose, and authorizing the sale of the property to MyTac LLC, with a hearing on December the 4th. And an ordinance for introduction number 3097-2019, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the terminal improvement capital project or capital fund, and authorizing an increase to the construction purchase order to Blazy Construction Inc., with a hearing on December 4th. And that is your consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to any item that the clerk just listed on the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. Next, we do not have any scheduled public comments this evening. Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to address the council on any item that is not on the agenda or the consent agenda? Please come forward. And you have 3 minutes. Yeah, that's you. Yeah, you're up. Just give your name and address for the record, please.
My name's Clyde Crandall. My address is 1304 Lawton Drive, Kenai. I sit on the Harbor Commission. I'm just curious about the dip net fishery report. I see that we're in the rears again this year. We had like a $40,000 to $50,000 deficit. We had our meeting Monday night. We talked with Councilmember Peterkin, and he's trying to put together some legislation or something to try and help us bolster the money coming in rather than going out for our beaches and taking care of bathrooms and the raking and all this stuff there. I just wish you'd please give it a consideration. This is the third year or second year we've run into deficit that is pretty substantial. We would try and like to turn that around and me on a personal note, I would like to see us do something to try and make the dip net fishery so it doesn't cost us money. You know, every year the city's paying for the use of people all over the state to use it. And I don't think we should have to do that. I think the other thing I was thinking about is in the dip net fishery, the policing of it. Maybe the city, along with the Harbor Commission or something, writing a letter to the Fish and Game to take care of their fines and their stuff. Now, there's ordinance on the books for fine if you do not turn in your tags. They do not enforce that. They do not enforce. Lots of people get their tags, they can lose them, then they just kind of fill one out. None of that is being enforced. And I hate to see the dip net fishery go the way it is. We have no idea how many fish are taken off that beach. And we really need to get a handle of it. You know, it is costing the city money, and I would really like to see the city council try and bolster our dip net fishery. That's it.
Thank you. Would you mind taking questions?
Sure.
From the council? Anybody from the council like to ask Mr. Councilmember Peterkin?
Yeah, Clyde, thanks for coming and sharing what we went through the other night. I am working with administration on a resolution to charge for the DipNet card, and a small fee, but I think that it would add up to a lot of people, but we have to find a way. Scott has been working with me, and we're just trying to find a way, instead of just trying to rush it out, to find a way that we think it can work. So we've been in contact with many people and trying to find the best way to implement it, and Paul's been working with me a little bit too, but appreciate your concerns. Are really important, and I also agree with the letter. I think we need to get get the fish to be properly reported. I think that's really important. So thank you.
Vice Mayor Navarre, or Councilmember Navarre? Oh, do you have the light on?
Oh, no. Oh, you say me?
Yes.
I thought you went to somebody
I'm
else.
sorry,
huh?
yeah.
Yeah, thanks for coming and sharing the information. I could be wrong, but because I hate to hear that we're losing money. We're not losing money. We actually have a reserve. It's my understanding from the dit net fishery that we've collected funds before. And that's to help balance out when you have low numbers of people that you don't, sometimes the fish don't show up, sometimes there's some issue. But I think that's getting somewhat low. I know we transferred some to the general fund at one point. So I don't want it to be out there that we're not collecting or doing, but you can't continue to have a deplete the fund balance that's been raised over the years. But I'll certainly be interested in what the Harbor Commission has to say if Mr. Councilmember Peterkin has an idea, and maybe the administration will have some kind of ideas too. We've looked at it. Just so you know, I have some concerns about continuing to raise the cost for the people to use the fishery, but we do want to cover our costs, and maybe there's other ways we can look at it. As far as the fish and game issue, I think we've raised it before, and that's something that we probably definitely need to try to get a better handle on. But at the same time, the state's struggling with funds and what that would cost, but we can certainly look at those avenues. But, so thanks to Harbor Commission for bringing it forward to us again and addressing some of your concerns. Thank you.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, I just chime in on this topic. What has happened, and we all understand, and this is not a new reveal, is that the state put us with an unfunded mandate and put us in the fishing business. We are dependent on what the tide and the seasons and nature brings us, but to accommodate this dip net, we have to invest tens of thousands of dollars. Okay, and we are looking for some way to buffer our costs, and some way to understand exactly what is the concern, but more or less the role and responsibility of the city in this. And perhaps at some point in time we could consider approaching our elected representatives to have a fund or a sum of money available to buffer our costs, our unexpected losses. You know, there's times where the fishery has just been shut down arbitrarily, or they'll say, well, we're going to extend it for 24 hours. Either way, that involves cost, either adding staff, reducing staff, and we're all aware of that. I just thought I'd spit it out as a concept, and maybe we can be holistic in our approach. Maybe not with what Mr. Peterkin is doing, but down the road, try and manage it better. We're doing a good job. We just need some help.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I just want to say that the state does a pretty good job of paying for the one down in Kasilof or wherever, so, anyway.
Yeah, and just first of all, thank you for your service on the Harbor Commission, Mr. Crandall, and I can't disagree with a lot of what you said. I've heard this, you know, for many years about some of the abuse in there. As far as fishing game, you know, and you know, I have folks that come up to me and say, you know, you guys should be doing something about it, about the violations down there. Now, we do citations for parking, you know, and things like that. But as far as the actual violation of fish and game laws, we don't have the authority to enforce those. And Fish and Game does make an effort to do that. If you read the Clarion, you'll see there's usually in the summertime there's a laundry list in the police reports of folks that are, you know, mainly not clipping tails or not filling out their harvest tickets. But there's certainly, I think, some level of abuse. I can't disagree with that. And I think it should be something that should be, you know, looked at, if nothing more for data reasons, to know what that fishery's harvesting. So I know there's been some talk. Mr. Oster and I, when we've gone to Juneau, have talked to Fish and Game about, and various legislators about, you know, if they're not going to just give us appropriations for mainly for capital improvements, is that they do come up with a way to fund, or a conduit to fund, you know, our efforts down there, help offset the costs. And just for clarification, I guess the one point I do want to make is I know last year we had this pretty big run of fish, and we were actually, and I remember Mr. Osterner sent out a report kind of late in the season that said we were just a little bit under projections. So we only ended up minus 3,000 last year, but the year before we were minus 46,000. So, and that's what Councilmember Navarro was referencing, that fund that we created to sort of take out some of the effects of the up and down year. So I don't know, last year, the other thing is there was a lot of fish. I think everybody got their fish early, because later in the year, there's still a lot of fish coming up and not a lot of effort. So, you know, it's something we'll definitely be looking at. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, and thank you, Mr. Crandall, for coming and speaking to us about this. You know, and I recollect that back when Tom Wagoner was our senator, he looked for a while at having a state fee that would be tied to the permit, and the funds could go to, you know, the Casila fishery, our fishery in Copper River, you know, really nothing came of it eventually because of, you know, stuff, the legislature, they have other things that they are already prioritizing. So that's kind of similar to what I'm hearing of the idea about the DipNet card. So it's interesting to have that discussion. Thank you.
Well, the DipNet cards have a law on them that says if you do not turn them in, you'll be fined $200. Now, Bob knows for a fact he didn't turn his crab card in last year, and he can't fish for crabs this year. And so they do already track all this and do that, they just don't enforce it, from what I can tell.
I can tell you they do for harvest reports for game.
Yeah,
But
they
they,
don't
and I
fish
know for this fishery, there's at times if you look at the numbers, it's somewhere around only 75 to 80% compliance, right? So there's 20-25% that's not being reported at all. So.
That'd be a huge income base for them. That's why I said if we could just remind them, that's just one little part of it. But just enforcing their own rules, they could boister to help pay for things. Okay, thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you again. Is there anybody else from the general public that'd like to address the council on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda? Oh, wow.
I'm Bob Peters, and I live in Old Town, and I really don't think this is the appropriate time in this meeting to discuss this, but since you insist, I too, as Mr. Navarre said, I'm concerned about the raising costs of this fishery. And come on, kids. You take in $450,000. If you're losing money on that, you're losing it. And I'm not saying the numbers don't say that. I'm saying that we end up with paved parking lots, four-wheelers, pickup trucks, a lot of good summer jobs for a lot of good kids and stuff. So it's not such a bad deal. I don't like all the congestion and traffic either. And I've lived here long enough and fished down there. I remember a lot of stuff that went on in the mouth of the river that doesn't go in there now. And one thing is, I think that the citizens of Kenai, because we do put up with the influx of traffic and the tromping around on our beach and the stench of the many carcasses of dead fish that are left behind, that we should be compensated in some way. Now, they've kind of battered around, and they, meaning you guys mostly, some idea of, well, gee, we don't know how we can do it. Well, it's just against the law, and well, the Supreme Court said, and da-da-da-da-da. I'm sure we could come up with a way that the citizens of Kenai could participate in that fishery for nothing. I'm thinking like, how about if say, the fee is $20 to go down there and fish. I mean, the fees are getting kind of, it costs you $10 to be dropped off down there. But anyway, how about this? $20 to go fish. So we just have a little note in there when you give them your $20. It says, oh, thank you for participating in the fishery this year. And as a little thank you, we'd like to give you this gift certificate for $20 applicable to the Kenai Water Department. And so if you lived in Chicago or the Matanuska Valley or somewhere, it probably wouldn't be very valuable. But if you lived in Kenai, you could take the thing and apply it to your water bill. And all right, there's some way we could do it. Anyway, I'm sure more of this will be discussed, but I don't know even how we got to this thing this evening, but I appreciate you listening to me.
Yeah, you bet. Do you mind taking any questions, Mr. Peters, if anybody has
Do you
any?
have questions?
Councilmember Navarre does, apparently. No.
Oh, okay, Mr. Navarre.
Don't make me regret it. No, I'm only kidding. I appreciate you brought up the fact in your statement about the Kenai residents, because even though it's misunderstood that you have 300 and some thousand out of Anchorage and another out of the Mat-Su, and because the percentage of those using the fishery from Kenai or on the peninsula is a low percentage compared to everybody that comes down, it's still a very high percentage of people that live here and utilize that fishery too. And so I appreciate the fact that you brought that up and you brought up the cost to the residents. And I know we've looked at different avenues and maybe we can look at that one too, so I appreciate that comment or to raise that again if there's something we can do for local residents for participating. But I still feel we have to somehow find ways to manage that fishery if we're going to be it in the long term, maybe make some capital and other capital investments too. And maybe that cuts some of the costs and some of the initial hit. But again, sometimes those don't always work out either. So again, I appreciate your testimony and bringing that issue up again.
Thank you. And to answer that, I would like to say, what would I like to say? No, I'd like to say that I too am concerned about the number of fish that are leaving that beach and that aren't accounted for. And you hear all these horror stories. Oh, gee, there we were at the swap meet in Arizona, and there were little fish jumped out of a can. He said, "Hi, I'm from Kenai," and blah, 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 blah. But so it's not our deal. It's the state's deal. So unless we've got some trick to twist the hands of the state, we have to approach it some other way, I'm thinking. But what do I know?
Yeah, and like I said, I thought, there is some enforcement that goes on. Is it to the extent that it could? I don't think so. I think there's, but I think there's probably also a level of, abuse in river, upriver from the dip net fishery also, people taking more than their limits and things like that. So, but it's funny to me, I think people from Alaska, they don't feel like they should have to pay to access a resource, and so I think that's probably plays a little bit in their, thinking. But it takes a lot of money to manage the fishery. It's not a couple thousand people like it was when it first started. It's tens of thousands of people, and I have a conversation with people all the time. Why do you have to charge us? And when I explain to them, well, can you imagine if we didn't have porta potties down there, what that beach would look like? And the porta potties alone are about $100,000. So, it takes money to manage the fishery. But it's interesting that someone will go up to Anchorage and spend $25 a night just to park the car overnight downtown and not bat an eye and not get anything else other than a parking spot. So I think we got to, maybe it's an education process for us to, let folks know of why we make it a better fishery. But I will tell you that, and a credit to management and administration, is that the people I talk to, that they think it's well run. They don't complain about, or didn't have the complaints they had years ago when people just threw their carcasses on the beach and it was littered with carcasses, up to the high tide line. So,
And fish, too.
thank you, Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry,
No,
Councilmember Glendening.
just coming late to the game here, just two things. Is one, we have tried in small ways to perhaps give our local people advantage. I believe this is before I was on council, but Bob Malloy can correct me if I'm wrong. We only charge to load limber and unlimber boats at our boat launch facility during the dip net fishing. The rest of the time, there is no fee. And then for parking along, say, Forest Drive and whatnot, we've issued permits, little clings to the local residents there so they can park and not, and not be confused for casual dip netters. So we're trying, but please come back with more ideas and anyone that's out there, and we'll gladly listen.
In response to your question, last night I was referred to in a discussion as knowing where all the dead bodies are. And, so anyway, I take that for what it's worth. Remember that when you see me coming. Thank you.
Could I have my shovel back?
Yeah. And on, and
The
then
chief wants to talk to you now.
on that, oh. And on that parting thought, thank you, Mr. Peters. Is there anybody else from the general public that'd like to speak to the council on any item that's not on the agenda or consent agenda?
I would. And I'll ask you to take one and pass it down. Marion Nelson, 4462529 Tower Hill Street, Ridgeway. Speaking as Vice President of the Board for the Kenai Fine Arts Center, Peninsula Art Guild, we have had a marvelous last week or so, 4 or 5 days, of a dozen artists painting in the gallery. There's a big mural from these 12 artists that are on all 3 of the 4 walls in the gallery, and it is astounding. There is not going to be anybody who walks in the door that is not going to drop their jaw on this. In fact, you see the gorilla in the upper left corner here, painted by James Adcox, who's one of the librarians at Kenai Public Library. It is huge, and it is absolutely amazing, and it's fun, and it looks incredibly powerful, and so forth and so on. Well, we usually have the food for the first Thursday reception near the front desk in the gallery, and we're moving it to the other, kind of the other side of that part of the gallery, because we know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to want to stand in front of this huge image of this gorilla and have their pictures taken with it or by it or whatever. It's that impressive. You see the names of the people who participated, and this is our November show, which is November and half of December, just because it works out better for us that way. But it's too hard to get volunteers the last 2 weeks of December, so we just extend the November show that way, and they get a little more kick for their time and their efforts. It is open now, today that is, and the first Thursday reception is tomorrow evening, so I want to make sure I invite you all to that, 5 to 7. I hope most of the artists will be there. I know a couple won't because they can't, but it will be a grand first Thursday reception. Questions?
Any questions of Ms. Nelson?
Hopping back to the beach, if I may. Can't resist. I walk over there frequently with my dog, and it seems as though in this last tide, there's been a lot of drop-offs, pretty close to the sidewalk area, if you can call it that, the road/sidewalking area. And I looked over the edge, well, I do most every time I'm there, but as I was peeking over the edge at one point, I thought, my God, this is right here. It wasn't like it was down there, it was like right there. So I don't know who of you or on the staff kind of takes a look at that once in a while. I'm sure you do, but there's like several places that look like they're very fresh and just that much closer.
And where's this at exactly?
Well, as you're coming from the highway and past the church, start the walkway.
Down South
You can't
Spruce.
drive, the street that you can't drive on unless you live there, like our handsome Mr. Peters here. The first huge rock that prevents vehicles from going in there, that has kind of a point that points actually right toward the water, right in that area. That's what astounded me. So because of that is not that far away. That's like right there. Made me actually want to walk further this way and feel my heart pumping a little bit on that. Plus, I mentioned to Henry the other day that there was another area, because the point of the dunes really took a beating by the creek. Just, there's a lot of places that really look like they had some serious washouts in there.
I see Mr. Ostrander jotting down notes and Mr. Curtin listening intently, so
I
sure
look
they'll
at
take
it
a look at it.
at least 2-3 times a week. So. Okay, I dogged this real quick.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Is there anybody else from the general public who'd like to speak to the council on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to public hearings. First up, D1 ordinance number 3092-2019, amending Kenai Municipal Code, section 1.10.030, organization meeting to provide that the terms of office of the mayor and other council members shall begin the Monday following the certification of the election, and this is sponsored by the city clerk. Pleasure of council. Councilmember Naxted.
I move to enact ordinance 3092, 2019.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3092-2019? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments, deliberation from council? Councilmember Navarre.
Thank you. Just for people's information, this is what was on the ballot and that the voters approved. And so we're now making it part of code. So thank you, Madam Clerk, for taking care of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion, deliberation, comments? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Councilmember Navarre?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet?
Yes.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next up is item D2, resolution number 3093-2019, accepting and appropriating a grant from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security passed through the State of Alaska Department of Military and Veterans Affairs for the purchase of a fire station alerting system, an IT security audit, and a base radio system replacement for dispatch. This is sponsored by administration. Pleasure of council. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to enact ordinance number 3093-2019.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to ordinance number 3093-2019? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments, deliberation, Councilmember Naxton.
Just a real basic question, and that we're going to purchase a fire station alerting system. We don't have one, and what is it?
Mr.
Or I don't know
Ostrander.
if we're replacing one, maybe.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Naxted. So the fire station alerting system is actually the second part of a project. The first grant that we received on this allowed us to upgrade the alerting system in Fire Station 1. This will allow us to extend that to Fire Station 2, which is the station on the airport. So it's just an upgrade to the existing alerting system that we had previously.
Is there any other deliberation, questions? I'd like to thank the Chief Ross for his work in submitting for these grants, but I do have a question. It sounds like the base radio system was only partially funded at $393,000. Is there a fiscal note on that for the total project?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Chief Ross probably could speak to this better than I can as far as what the estimated cost. I know he's been working on it. I don't know if he has a final price yet, but Chief Ross, if you could help us out.
Mayor Gabriel, so we've been working with the contractor to get pricing. It was significantly above that when we sought the grant, and the grant came in lower. So we're looking at the possibility of dividing the grant into a couple phases and potentially getting the bulk of it done now with those funds, and I don't have a quote on that, so I don't know. I think it'll probably be a little more than the $393,000, and then potentially seeking further grants. Anyway, we want to look at that, whether it should be two phases and how much more that would cost versus doing it all now and coming back for city funds. So we may be back to ask council for an appropriation, but I don't know yet till we really look at the project and the numbers.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that's kind of where I was going with it. If we would expect to see something at budget time that would make up the difference and how much that would be. That was the purpose of the question, so no problem.
All right, Mayor Gabriel, I would expect that you'll see something sooner because of the timeline of the budget. We'll have to do something this winter to move forward with it. Or the timeline of the grant. So
Okay.
it would probably be before budget time that we would discuss at least the first phase.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any other discussion, deliberations from council? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Yes.
Councilmember Navar.
Yes.
Councilmember Knoxtet.
Yes?
Councilmember Petty.
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes,
Councilmember Peterkin.
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Council, we're now on item D3, ordinance number 3094-2019, accepting and appropriating a donation from Hillcorp Energy Company to assist with the annual Kenai Senior Center Thanksgiving Dinner, sponsored by administration. Pleasure, council.
Like to move that we pass this.
You'd like to enact ordinance number 3094-2019?
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3094-2019? Seeing no one, we'll bring it back to council. Comments, deliberation from council? Councilmember Naxton.
I'd just like to thank Hillcorp once again for their generous donation of $3,500 for this event.
Councilmember Petty.
Yes, I also would like to personally thank Hillcorp for their continuation of hosting the Thanksgiving dinner and how much it's really appreciated and how it's so look forward to for the seniors. So I thank you.
Councilmember Glendenning.
yeah, just to echo the theme is that this Thanksgiving dinner is just so widely accepted and actually anticipated by the community, and the idea that Hillcorp would once again donate funds to guarantee its success is greatly appreciated by the folks at the senior center, and I know by the community of Kenai. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councilmember Navarre.
Yes, just to reiterate, I think it's a great partnership, and I thank them too. And they involve, normally, I think Mountain View School, I think the 5th grade class or the 4th and 5th, I'm not sure. Some kids from them come over and help serve. And then with the senior center and that, so it just shows a great partnership all the way around. So it's a great event and a great opportunity for our young kids to learn about giving back to their community and seeing that, as well as a company helping with the resources to make it happen, and then the seniors getting to benefit. And as you know, they do a lot in our community and help raise funds too. So it's a win-win, and those are the type of things that make us proud to be able to live right here in Kenai. Thank you.
And I guess I'll just chime in too. If this has been actually a tradition from 1976. If you read the kind of where we're at now, there was a homemakers club provided provided and served the first meals to the seniors, and there it began and was passed through Unical, Oil, Agrium, Marathon Oil, and now since 2012 Hillcorp. And it is a tradition. So, over 40 years, going on almost 45 years, and like you said, I enjoy going there and watching the Mountain View kids serve, and after they serve, we usually sat down with them and in a separate where they feed them, and it is nice to see their level of appreciation too, because they do a great job. And unfortunately, I think I'm going to be at the mayor's conference this year on the 19th, so because it's during AML. But unfortunately, if I can't make it, it's a bummer, because that's a good one. So, any other comments? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Navar.
Yes.
Councilmember Knoxtet.
Yes?
Councilmember Petty.
Yes,
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Council, we're now on item D4, resolution number 2019-72, authorizing the city to join the Alaska Remote Seller Sales Tax Commission for the purpose of developing, implementing, and enforcing a remote seller sales tax code and designated commission representatives, sponsored by administration. Pleasure, council. Vice Mayor Navarre.
Move for the adoption of resolution number 2019-72.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2019-72? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Would council like to hear a little overview from our city attorney on this before we?
Please.
I might preemptive strike on that. Mr. Bloom?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, members of council. So what this authorizes us to do is, as a city, appoint a representative to join sort of the first phase of this, which is to form a committee or commission that would oversee this centralized taxing authority. If you recall, this stems from a Supreme Court decision that sort of allowed for online sales tax, moving beyond the traditional concept of nexus, that there had to be a physical presence in the jurisdiction in order to impose a tax. So this, because we don't have a state sales tax and the state is not involved in this process, one of the things that we have to do based on this Supreme Court decision is to have a centralized taxing authority. And that is so the organizations that are being taxed, the remote sellers, just have one entity to deal with and don't have to deal with all the different taxing jurisdictions within the state of Alaska. So what this resolution does is it authorizes us to be a part of this commission to help form the path going forward. It's not a commitment beyond that at this point. We can get out of it with future legislation if we don't like the direction that it ends up going. What this isn't doing right now is we're not appointing a representative. I think myself and Paul and our finance director, Terry, kind of need to put our heads together and think about who has the time within the city and who's going to be the most effective, because we want to get on the board of this commission to help shape the path going forward. It is, AML is sort of the administrative force behind this right now, and it's uncertain what continued role they'll play, but they will definitely have a role going forward. If there's any specific questions or if you want more information, I'm happy to answer.
Questions of Mr. Bloom? Councilmember Knoxon.
I'm not sure exactly the question to ask, but when I think of taxation, I think of the state, the borough, that kind of an entity that's been established, you know, through a constitution. And so it maybe help me understand, or a commission can be created out there that does the same thing. It doesn't sound like a legal entity, but maybe it is. I'm really not understanding it.
Okay.
Mr. Bloom.
Thank you. Well, the intent is to create a legal entity that can sue and be sued, but the entity, this centralized taxing authority, doesn't have the authority to tax. We retain that authority as the city of Kenai, as the Kenai Peninsula Borough will too. So they're basically just doing the administration of, they're providing software, or they're contracting with a software company. So through the commission, they will essentially collect and remit the tax for us on behalf of our authority to exercise that. So we're not creating a commission that has any taxing power beyond the authority that we as the city of Kenai tell them that we have. So they're just collecting that tax on our behalf and remitting it to us. Just like if the borough right now went out to a third party, rather than doing all the software and auditing in-house and contracted with somebody else to do their, taxing.
So I guess that brings a question to my mind. Does the borough have a role here, because they collect and remit to us now? So I guess.
So certainly, our tax code provides that we just follow essentially whatever the borough does, with one exception, and that's the non-prepared food tax that this council specifically exempted themselves from. So the borough will change their taxing code. Part of this is that we have to have a statewide uniform code as far as definitions within the taxing authority, so that a remote seller, it's easier for them to work with, just one set of definitions statewide versus having to deal with, thousands of different definitions from each jurisdiction. So the borough's going to change their code. We don't have to change our code. We can if we want to pull out any specific exceptions. I'm not clear on whether the taxes will flow through the borough to us or come directly through this taxing authority to us and bypass the borough. There's a lot of open questions. This is just really authorizing us to form this committee and take the next step forward. There will be probably other legislation that will come back before you before this commission starts collecting any taxes on our behalf. So this is just basically authorizing us to be a part of this, to hopefully help shape it going forward. If we don't like what we see, we can pull out. I certainly think it's the right thing to do at this point. It's not really committing you to do anything other than let somebody from the city, authorizing somebody from the city to participate this, and then see what it looks like a little further down the road.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. Any other questions or comments? And just as an A side to this, Councilmember Navarro was on Sound Off fairly recently with Nils Andreasen, who's our AML executive director, and gave some pretty good information regarding how this would work and how it would be funded and that sort of thing. Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes, I'm just responding to City Attorney Bloom's rendition of what happened. I wholeheartedly support this and thank you for your very thorough analysis of this. I believe it'll help fill the void created by the off-site purveyors of merchandise, I guess is the best way to say it. And of course, I will be supporting this. And as I understand it now, the path forward is that it parallels how the borough collects and manages taxes on our behalf. It's just that we have this bolt-on or this add-on of the mail order features of this. And is it imperative that we have someone on that board, on that council? Is that something that has to happen right away, or can we just through normal channels work with the borough as they like we do in collecting, as they collect the sales tax on our behalf?
Mr. Bloom?
Thank you. So there's essentially two things happening. So there's this commission that's forming, and then there's the board of the commission. So we probably want, I think we want a seat on the board, and that will give us a louder voice moving forward, especially if we can load up the board with some local jurisdictions. If Soldotna, the borough, Homer, I mean, we could have a real say in how it moves forward. So that will come next. There will be board elections. I believe during the week of AML is scheduled to elect a board. They needed a minimum of 7 jurisdictions to take the first step going forward. They've got that, so the first meeting will be that week, I believe, of AML, where a board will be appointed, and I think we will try and get a seat on that board.
Thank you.
And just for reference here, Mr. Bloom, how much has our administration, yourself, the Shebank, Mr. Ostrander, been involved with getting to where we're at thus far?
We haven't been as involved as some other municipalities. Mr. Eubanks and I attended a meeting in Anchorage earlier this year, and from that they had volunteers for different committees. Neither of us participated directly in those, and I think part of that was because we wanted to have a unified voice with the borough, and we thought we could get done what we wanted in cooperation with the borough. The borough was more involved than we were because we don't do our own taxes and collections, and really the borough does all that for us at this point. We weren't as involved in other communities, but we've certainly been meeting with the borough on a regular basis. Terry and I and Mr. Navarre met with Nels last week, I believe, and talked about some of the stuff. And so we've been involved. It's kind of hard because it's been amazing. I think when Terry and I left Anchorage, the last Anchorage meeting we had, I really had no hope that this was going forward. I thought it was dead in the water, and AML has done an incredible job keeping this going and getting us to where we are now. What happens next? I think we've got the momentum to carry this through, but it's unsure exactly how it's going to look going forward, because the first thing we have to do is form a board, then that board is going to approve bylaws, and we'll go forward from there. So a lot of it depends on how those bylaws look, what the different contractual relationships look like. But I think AML's done a fantastic job this year. I think they've got a real solid software company. MuniRev, I think, is the name of the company that they're looking at, and I know that at least Nels is very happy with the pricing structure so far, but all that is sort of to be determined going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Will. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, I have some follow-up questions. I support the resolution, and I support Section 2, which says the city manager and city attorney are authorized to appoint themselves or other city employees as the city's representative on the commission. I got a little question about Section 1 because it's got some really broad authority, and that says that the city manager is authorized to negotiate, execute, and submit all necessary documents to obtain and maintain membership in the commission, including the intergovernmental remote sales tax agreement. So is the agreement that's in our packet that we've read, is that actually just a draft and not a final? And there's still something that you're all going to be negotiating?
Mr. Bloom.
I believe what's in the packet is the final, the agreement to sign. I think, so what we've done and why that language is so broad, and it could probably be restricted if that made you more comfortable. It's a resolution that I made changes to it that are specific to the city of Kenai, but in general, all the municipalities are trying to sign a very similar resolution of support. And so that's why I think the language is so broad, because we're not 100% sure exactly what the path going forward is, and we want the flexibility to be able to continue forward without having to come back to council for further authorization.
So follow-up question. So say we give you that authority, and you talked about bylaws, and so there are going to be some bylaws for the organization and everything. So would those bylaws go back to the individual municipalities, for their bodies to approve them, or we just be saying, go ahead and do it and run with it, and whatever you come up with is we're pre-approving it? I just want to be sure what I'm.
Yep. So you are authorizing us to participate in approval of the bylaws, assuming we have a position on the board. Again, we can pull out at any time. And so whoever is appointed to the board, I'm sure whether it's Terry, myself, Paul, or somebody else, we're all going to keep the council informed as each step goes forward. And at any time, we can decide, hey, this isn't for us. But I don't think it's really practical for, eventually we hope to have almost every municipality that has a sales tax in the state a part of this. So for every time for the commission or the board to make a decision to have to go back to that many jurisdictions and get separate approval, I don't think it is really practical. So this is in some ways a leap of faith, and that's something that we talked with about Nels and the borough. The caveat is, and the saving grace is, we're not past any point where we can pull out without any penalty.
So, yeah, and I wanted to have that discussion, and I thought it's good for the. I'm sorry. I said I would make better use of my mic, and I'm not even using it. I wanted to have that discussion because of what that said, and I think that we have an excellent city manager and city attorney, and have a level of trust with you guys, and I'm sure that you would do its best interest for us and our municipality and other municipalities in terms of how to set this up for getting the sales tax, which is going to benefit us. It's not a new tax; it's just collecting tax from online, and so that I'm sure that you'll be reporting to us regularly on the status of that, and then you'll bring back items that you think that we that we should approve or whatever. So I'm thank you for the discussion, and I'm going to support that.
And if I may just really quickly, just sort of, I guess I feel like the bus is going forward with or without us, and it's just a matter of whether or not we want to be on that bus. And we don't have to be, and we can pull out, but that bus is going to move forward with or without us at this point.
Want to be on the bus, wanted to have the discussion, so that you guys would say, that you're going to act prudently and appropriately with the authority you're given. So thank you.
Councilmember Navarre.
Thank you, and thank you for referencing that the executive director for ML, Nils Andreasen, was on the peninsula and participated in Sound Off along with me to answer questions and to explain. And just so you know, I was at last night's Borough Assembly meeting also, and they had this in front of them and they passed it unanimously. And also I want to clarify the two things I said, because there seems to be a lot of misinformation. The one is, this is not a new tax. And second thing is that the municipalities are the taxing authority, as Scott stated. It's not AML. That's why this next step, and I wanted to remind everybody and thank everybody from the council, because we participated, I believe, $3,500. That's been our only cost at this point, if I'm remembering correctly, to participate to get AML to kind of get the information, and AML contracted with Larry Pursley, and that helped put some of this whole project together. And it's an amazing, I'm amazed too at the level of work that Larry produced and accomplished, and also what AML has done in this short period of time to have this out there, and that cities and boroughs across the state can start collecting tax that otherwise is being lost as the internet is taking sales and making it easier for people to buy items even that are available locally. In the old days, it mostly was items that you couldn't find locally. But as the demographic change, if we don't find a way to follow those sales tax dollars, we'll be forced to raise our mill rate or something to make up, just to stay even keel with our current services to provide, police and fire and other roads and that safety. So the other thing I wanted to say is that the commission will be made up of municipalities, and that's why it's not like it's going to come back. The commission could decide to say, hey, go take this back to everybody and let them see what they think of it. But essentially, like we do with an ordinance, you give and take on some things. And it has primarily, and I also thank Brandy from the borough who did a lot of work on this with AML and Larry Pursley and the others. in kind of giving the information, because they do have all our tax information at this point. But as Scott pointed out, and I think it's more likely than not, that in this agreement that we sign, we're going to get the revenue directly to us, because there's no reason why it will go to one entity and then be distributed from there. But again, I don't, some of that will be worked out with some of the costs. That's why there's a lot of this unknown right now, but I think every city and municipality in this state is going to be very happy with the end result. And I think you'll even see in the future, there was some question as to whether the state could do this. And I don't want to beat up the state, but I guarantee you they can't do it as cheaply and as effectively as us as municipalities have done this. And it's really the municipalities that have accomplished this. And I think you'll see that if, in fact, the state institutes a sales tax, they'll have to join this entity and have them collect their tax form, because it's going to be cheaper and more effective. And I believe that's what you'll see, more than the state take it over and administer it for all the administrations in the future. So we'll see how it goes, but I think the model that we're working on, and I think, as Scott stated, and I do believe it falls within our administration, our finance director, our attorney, and our city manager, to be at those meetings and kind of understand and hear the pros and cons about the different ideas, and the draft bylaws and commission organization thing is there. But until those are finalized by the group, and as Scott stated, all those that are anticipating, they get an opportunity to get a seat at the beginning. And that's one of the pluses for joining early and doing this. So I also, as you can hear me, will be supporting this ordinance. And I think it's the right thing for our citizens and for us to be able to keep our taxes low and stay up with the way the world's changing and still accomplish those. So with that, I guess I'll end, but there's a lot of information and a lot of things going on, but I'm positive for our municipalities across the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Peterkin.
I just have a question. Does the borough, I know we're taking online sales tax right now from some of the biggest ones in the country, but in my understanding, the borough collects it and then we get it, because we have to wait for each quarter to get it. Do they charge us anything for that?
Mr. Bloom, are you asking if the borough charges for the administration of the, Mr. Bloom?
Terry can correct me if he knows differently, but I'm pretty sure the answer is no, they don't charge us anything.
Thanks.
Councilmember Navarro?
And Scott, you can correct me but the agreement with the borough, the borough gets all penalties and interest on accounts. I think they get the litigation one. I forget what it exactly says, but essentially we get all the taxes collected. But so even though the borough does a lot of service for us on that, I don't know what the exact number is, but they do get some revenues from different entities within our city if they get penalized or they're not forwarding. And maybe Terry can answer that more clear, but I know there's some type of an agreement where they get to keep certain funds.
Mr. Eubanks?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Navarre, I believe you are correct. I believe it's not, I believe the only thing the borough gets to keep is a portion of penalty. We get all tax and all interest on our taxes that they do collect. You know, the borough earns a little bit of interest on our money because they hold it for about 30 days. We get paid monthly for all taxes that they collect, and that's both property and sales tax. We get paid the last Friday of every month. They do a wire transfer to us. So they hold that money for about a month on average. So they get a little bit of revenue off of the interest on that too.
Any other discussion on resolution number 2019-72? Councilmember Naxton.
I don't have that much more to add, although I do support it, and it is not a new tax, it's an existing tax. It is a way for us to receive taxes that we weren't in before, and to help support our government. I guess the other thing that it does, to some degree, is it helps level the playing field with our businesses here that are paying taxes within our city. If you want to go buy a shirt or do a good of some sort, you do pay taxes here. It kind of brings the online a little bit more in line with that kind of competition. So I appreciate that aspect also, just the level playing field.
Request unanimous consent.
I just want to make just a quick comment before we do jump in that, is that I can't agree, I agree with everything that was set up here regarding, leveling the playing field and government services cost money, and a lot of our number one revenue generator for the city budget is sales tax. So, and what's happening, and I always start this conversation with how many people in this room have bought something online in the last month, and almost every instance you'll find almost everybody raises their hand. So it's becoming more and more of a common way to shop, and you can get now. You used to get certain things online. Now it's toilet paper, household items, and things like that. So, as this, I think it's a way to get out ahead of this, because this is what's becoming more and more common as more and more revenue being spent online, and in a way for us to capture that, provide the services we do. So, with that, I will say that unanimous consent was requested. Is there an objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2019-72 is approved. Next, we have item D5, resolution number 2019-73, authorizing the city manager to recruit for and hire an additional police officer position based on anticipated attrition, sponsored by administration. Pleasure of council. Councilmember Naxton.
I move to approve resolution 2019-73.
I'll second that.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to resolution number 2019-73? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. And I guess I'll just maybe open up with administration to give a little overview on this. Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So this resolution authorizes the city manager to recruit up to 19 in the police department. Right now, we've budgeted 18 positions. Since I've been at the city, it's been a constant struggle to keep the police department fully staffed. As a matter of fact, there hasn't been a time in the 3 years I've been here that the police department has been fully staffed and fully trained. Right now, we're down 4 positions. We've got 2 vacancies. We've got a third position, a third officer that's actually at the academy getting training, and a fourth that is on light duty. So 4 positions down. It creates a situation where there's a lot of forced overtime, a lot of stress on the department itself. So this just really gives administration a tool to essentially over-recruit. And we would do it in a way that we would hope that it would not impact the budget in any way. Because we're so understaffed, what we're finding typically year after year is the police department is lapsing a lot of money back into the budget because so much of the personnel cost that was budgeted is not expended. So again, this would be a tool that would only be used in periods when we are having significant issues with recruitment and retention. The hope is that by over-recruiting, we can actually get to a point at some point in the future where we are fully staffed and fully trained. Just for the council's information, there are multiple other things that we're looking at doing to help with both recruitment and retention of police officers. You'll be seeing an ordinance at your next meeting for compensation changes that administration is recommending for the police department to help in this area as well. So there's multiple things we're trying to do. It's to the point now where while I wouldn't call it a crisis, if we were to lose additional police officers, we may get to the point where we'd actually have to bring in people from the outside to support the level of service that we need for the residents of the city. So again, this is just a tool that we think will help to get us closer to a fully staffed and fully trained department. Thank you.
Councilmember Navarre.
Thank you. A question, I appreciate this resolution, and I'm more inclined to, I have two concerns. I'm more inclined to raise it to allow you up to 2 positions. And my other concern is in the second section, that it's saying that it references the FY20 budget. How are you going forward from here? Can we leave the FY20 budget out and maybe, again, I don't know if it works to be able to recruit up to 2 more than the budget has, but only authorize you to hire 1 more within any year's budget, and then it's action going forward, then to me, it kind of limits it to the 2020 budget, and next year we'll be in the same situation. I see this as a tool that needs to be in place moving forward. And I don't know if Scott has an amendment for me or if you have a comment to my questions or concerns.
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Navarre. It's a valid point in that this does restrict it to just during this 2020 budget. I guess administratively, we're hoping that with some of the additional changes that we're going to make, that we can get over this hump, and this is not a tool that we'll need beyond this point. If council did want to extend this beyond this fiscal year, you could just remove, we could make a small amendment that would remove the reference to 2020 and make it essentially 1 more than is budgeted in any fiscal year. So that would be a reasonable amendment to make if council chooses to extend this beyond the 2020 year. Again, we're hopeful that we're going to make some substantive changes that will get us over this hump and get us fully staffed, but that would certainly give us this tool for more than just the fiscal year.
Mr. Bloom?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Terry might correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that's necessary because the positions would be approved in the FY21 budget, right?
Mr. Eubanks?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not exactly certain that we authorize positions through the budget process. I mean, the budget process appropriates funds which fund positions, but there's certainly not any binding parts of the adopting ordinance that authorize specific positions or limit specific positions. So it may be practice, certainly, but I view more the budget as the appropriating portion and not necessarily like authorizing positions and such.
So I get Councilmember Navarre.
I was prepared. I want to, maybe I don't necessarily, I'm prepared just, but I'm willing to have the attorney, I don't want to do something, but I too want to, in section 2, maybe we leave it at the 1 positions at this time, but in that section 2, add, let's see, and within is take out the FY 2020 and just say budgeted within
1 more than is
the budget. So maybe just take out FY 2020. And I don't know if legal has an issue. If it does, but I think, if I heard you correctly, you're saying we've never been at it, and I don't see where you do it 1 year that you're now not, you play catch-up. You need this tool to stay that catch-up, unless I'm not understanding something correctly, because if you go back to the old system and you get full staff, then immediate, when there's one, then you're in the rotation again. So that's, I guess I have to get a second before I can talk to it, but I'll call myself point of order.
Yeah, and I guess my question would be is if we took out that reference to 2020 and we remained fully staffed, would we hire a new officer every year based on not having that? And I mean, well, it authorizes the city manager. It doesn't mandate that he hires extra officers, but, and Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, I'd point out that the city manager did shoot us a clue as to future revelations, actually in the near future, as to how the situation is going to be managed. I would suggest we just accept the 2020 and carry it forward through this next half year. And the city manager has it in his view to manage the situation. And when he shows his cards and we have a reveal, perhaps we can look at this holistically, comprehensively, and dial in forecast our needs and dial in a specific request into ordinance or code.
Any other comments from council? Councilmember Naxton.
I tend to agree with Mr. Glendenning on that. I think just moving forward for right now, that what Mr. Navarre had said made sense also, but I think we'll move forward that way. But I don't want to go down too far in a rabbit hole, but you did talk about incentives that you have in mind and all of that, and I'm aware that it takes when we get a new officer, it takes a year to train them before we can actually put them on the street, and that seems to be quite an investment that we have. What is their incentive after their 1 year to stay on? I'm not sure if it's on the beginning end that we're having the problem with folks leaving, or at the farther end. And if a college wants somebody or whatever, I mean, if you get your tuition paid, like I'm kind of thinking that that's how this is working here, you have an obligation to whoever's funding that and paying for it. And how does that work with the city and hiring, if it's a new officer or fireman perhaps?
Mr. Bloom? I'm sorry, Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Naxted. So, as far as, when we do hire a brand-new officer that doesn't have any academy training, it does take close to a year to get them fully trained and being able to be independent on their own in the department. There's no obligation currently that they are required to stay with the department for any amount of time after that training. We aren't seeing the problems with retention with the officers very early on in their career, where most of the issues we're seeing with retention is our more senior officers that have been with the department for 5 or more years. As far as some of these incentives that we're looking to institute, and that you'll see at your December 4th meeting, one of them does specifically talk about officers that already have that training under their belt, which is something that is significant advantage to the city. If we can get what's called a lateral officer from another agency, either from in the state of Alaska or even out of the state of Alaska, there's significant cost savings to the city themselves. But on top of that, we're able to bring that officer on and provide the services much more quickly than if they're green coming straight off the street. So we are recommending at this point, administration is going to bring forward a recommendation to actually provide hiring bonuses to people that fit that category. So laterals that are currently working on an agency that's in the state of Alaska, or a lateral that's working at a department somewhere in the lower 48, we're going to incentivize that by giving them a bonus to come on to the city, because it's a wash as far as the cost to the city because of the costs that are incurred with the academy training, and then we are able to provide those services much more quickly to the residents.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I appreciate the discussion and the information. I support the resolution as is, and I'm looking forward to seeing the incentives that you're going to bring to us at the first meeting in December.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I just wanted to add that as far as this resolution goes and the ability to recruit to 19, again, this is really just a tool that is available, and we'll have to use it. Whoever's in my role is going to have to use it very carefully. you know, Chief Ross does a really good job of managing his department and understanding what some of the potential losses within that department are. So oftentimes, we have an indication of what we're going to see as far as folks leaving the department before it happens. So an example that I brought up before when we've talked about this is if we recruit to 19 and by some miracle we do actually get to 19 and then we lose an officer and then we're at 18, depending on the situation that we're in, I may not recruit at that point to 19 because the intent isn't to move us to 19 full-time officers. It's really to try to get to 18, recognizing that by recruiting to 19 we might get there. So it is going to have to be managed very carefully, and there is likely going to be a situation that if we get to 19, we lose down to 18, that we would not recruit for that 19th, depending on the situation, depending on what the chief tells me as far as potential losses in the department over the next 6 to 12 months. So it is going to take some management and extending it beyond 2020 because of that. It might give me some hesitation because I think that you do need to be very, very careful using this tool in recruitment.
Councilmember Navarro.
Yeah, I appreciate, I'm still in favor of my amendment because it does leave the authority with the city manager. It doesn't make the city manager. Nothing here says that the city manager must go out, but now to that tool, and like I said, I honestly see that tool, if you're trying to get, because you read across this country, people are pulling and going right and left. You're hearing it at the state trooper level. We're losing some of our trained officers, you know, at times in different ways, both to the state troopers and other sources or other departments. And so it just gives the city manager that tool to use when needed. Otherwise, like you said, you'll be a city manager, whether it's you or somebody else in the future, they'll have to come to the council again and say, well, now I need this tool again, when in fact we should give the tool in this particular case. I don't see the recruitment. I'm anxious to see what kind of things, because other departments might steal your ideas to keep their officers, if in fact you're successful with them. But so I still believe this is a tool that needs to be put in the toolbox, not a one-year fix. I don't see it as because like you said, let's say you got to 19 and then one leaves. Now you're at 18 again, and you hear that you're going to lose one in 6 months, but yet till he leaves, and let's say it's right at the end of the 2020 budget, and now you're going to be in the 2021, and now that tool isn't there. Now you have to come back to us again. So unless I'm not understanding something, I'd ask for people to support this and just let the city manager have that tool in his toolbox.
I guess for clarification, is there an amendment on the floor?
There wasn't a second to the motion. He
Yeah.
didn't really say I moved to. He sort of
Yeah,
referred
I know,
to
that's,
there
I guess
being
that's
an
where I was,
amendment afterwards,
I
so-
guess if we want to go, did you want to formalize an amendment, Councilmember Navarro?
I thought there was a second because I even called myself out of order, but
There was no second, sir.
Yeah, I don't,
so yeah, at this time, I would still move in section 2 to delete the FY 2020. And and I think that would do it. And again, maybe it could be something we add to budgets in the future year to just further clarify it. But so at this time, I think I'll just delete the FY 2020.
A second.
now we have an amendment on the floor. that we've debated already to some degree. Any discussion on the amendment? Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I kind of have mixed feelings about it. I understand Councilmember Navar's point, but, you know, the city manager has said it's a tool to be used carefully and you know, was going to bring us some ideas for incentives and wasn't sure that he needed it going forward. For the, you know, I know that we have recruitment problems, you know, from discussions that we've had in council, that there's a benefit to having this brought to us so that we know that this year we're at a critical point. And so there's something that needs to be done about that this year. If we take it out, and so it applies to any budget year, we might not have the same kind of notice about what's happening. You know, it'll be more anecdotal or you know, whatever. So that's why I'm not sure that I want to support it, because I see a benefit from, you know, I think I do have confidence in our manager's ability to manage the city, and also, you know, I agree with his assessment of Chief Ross and his management of the police department. I'm benefiting from having this discussion, and I guess what I'm saying is you know, I think they may not need this tool next year. If they do, it would be good to know about that and have a discussion about why it's happening and what else. So for that reason, I kind of think there's a benefit to keeping it with the 2020 budget. Thank you.
Councilmember Navar.
Thank you. I appreciate Councilman Malloy, because it refreshed. I wanted to raise that point when I made the amendment. And again, and Terry certainly could answer it, or the city manager, but because we approved this, it doesn't automatically make the budget transfer or the money in the budget. And the FY 2020 budget gets over in about 7 months from now, 8 months. I anticipate, if this went through, that we approve and the city manager has the approval, but he would have to then bring a budget adjustment, or Terry would, to the council for us to approve. And so let's say they finally get this person on and they have 19, and let's say it's April or March of 2020, you're only going to be seeing a budget adjustment for the 2020 budget that we'd have to approve, so we'd know what's happening within the budget of, let's say, $20,000 or whatever that number might be. And then in our 2021 budget, when we're working on it in that, then if we're going to maintain at 19 for 6 months because they're aware of somebody dropping out in October of 2020, which is 3 months, 4 months into our new FY 21 budget, then there would be, the administration would appropriate that amount. And then, unless they heard of another one dropping out, they wouldn't recruit automatically to jump up to the 19. But in fact, if you're going to try to stay at the 18, you're going to need this tool in the toolbox. Just because even with incentives and different things, you won't. So if your intent is, and I concur with it, to because of this recruitment issue, then have the tool there. And correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to be informed of the budget changes. It is that the city manager doesn't just have point blank and not have to make a budget transfer or to notice the council. So I think that's a good way going forward, and we know exactly what this issue is costing us. But, so I still ask for your support.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah, I'm not supporting this, but, I mean, the problem came up, we just heard about it, we're reacting to it, we meet twice a month. And, in fact, the city manager said he didn't think it's a good idea to even keep it on the books, so I think we just need to move on here. Thanks.
Any other comments, deliveries, Councilmember Nexon?
I would agree with Mr. Navarre if the city manager was out of ideas and didn't have plans and things he was going to implement, which he does. So that kind of there's a whole bunch of other things that are going to happen in this next 7 or 8 months, whatever that time period is. And I don't know what they're going to be. And hopefully they're going to be positive, in which case then the 2020 works. As Mr. Peterkin pointed out, it's a resolution, and it can come up at any one meeting, and we can have a new resolution pretty much instantly, frankly, within every 2 weeks. Also, it was the administration that put this together. They limited themselves, and I think that was intentional. So I'm just inclined to leave it as is and not vote for the amendment, and then we'll see how things go.
Councilmember Glendenning?
Yeah, just to reiterate my previous thought train, I agree with Councilor Naxted. This is the placeholder just to set a theme and theory. The city manager has a plan which will be revealed in the next meeting or going forward in the budget cycle, and I believe we can address this issue comprehensively and holistically in the near future. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess where I'm at with, I appreciate Councilmember Navarre's, willingness to give administrations a little bit more latitude here, but, I think if this comes before us again, because we're still having problems with retention, then at that time, that might be an appropriate time to maybe make that change, say, okay, that didn't work, but at this point, I would not support the amendment, just look at how this works, and if it's going to be something that comes back again, that maybe we'd consider Councilmember Navarre's concerns. Any other comments? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll on the amendment.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning?
No.
Councilmember Peterkin?
No.
Mayor Gabriel?
No.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
No.
Councilmember Navarre?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxted?
No.
Motion fails.
So we now have resolution number 2019-73, main motion before us. Any other comments, deliberation, Vice Mayor or Councilmember Navarre?
I'm going to try one more amendment just because I don't want it to come back and I want it to be in the toolbox. So I'm going to leave the FY 2020 in there, and I'm going to add and 2021 budgets. So I'm going to add FY 21 also.
I'll second.
As I stated, and now if I could speak to it,
Councilor,
thank
yes,
you.
Councilor.
As I stated, 7, 8 months, it's 7 months by the time you got the 2 holidays here, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then you're in the first of the year. I at least want them to be able to use this toolbox and have time to implement the incentives and also not worry about going forward. And that'll give us a clear look as whether there's any impact to the 2020 budget, which, I'd be surprised with the way they're hiring and if they get them and then they get them trained and somebody go and then, but at least be able to go through the 2021 budget. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Councilmember Glendenning?
Yeah, again, I won't be supporting this amendment. I'm convinced that our police chief, administration, our city manager, if not a laser-like focus, at least have a bright light on the situation. And I think we should just give them at least time to develop their theme and theory and how this is going to be managed. And we have a budget cycle coming up for the next year, and all of this can be comprehensively addressed in our discussions. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Glendenning.
No.
Councilmember Peterkin.
No.
Mayor Gabriel.
No.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
No.
Councilmember Navarre.
No.
Councilmember Naxtet.
No.
There's some,
Well, I was gonna say yes, because, you know, but no.
there was some gamesmanship there.
Councilmember Naxtet.
No.
Councilmember Petty.
Yes.
Motion fails.
Thank you. We now, resolution number 2019, main motion. Any further discussion or comments?
Call the
Request
question.
unanimous consent?
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection to unanimous consent for approval of resolution number 2019-73? Seeing no objection, resolution 2019-73 is approved. Next, we have resolution number 2019-74, declaring a utility easement 20-foot wide between the shared lot lines of Tract A and lots 4, 5, 6, Block 1, Bridge Road Subdivision Number 2, and Lot 7A, Block 1, Bridge Road Subdivision, Lockwood Edition, as set forth on the attached Exhibit A, is not needed for a public purpose, and consenting to its vacation requested by administration. Councilmember, or Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to approve resolution number 2019-74.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2019-74? See no one, bring it back to council. Comments, deliberation from council.
Request unanimous consent?
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there an objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2019-74 is approved. Next, we have resolution number 2019-75, awarding a contract for city-owned lands appraisal services requested by administration. Pleasure of council. Councilmember Naxton.
I move for approval of resolution 2019-75.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2019-75? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments, deliberation. Council, Councilmember Naxton.
Just a quick question. We have a laydown that shows us the properties that are going to be included in this RFP, or that we're approving. And looking at the airport lands, I think a couple of months ago we approved a lease south of the terminal building, and I think there was a condition that there be a subdivision, and it's not highlighted there. I was wondering if that might be included, if that subdivision happens, or can it be even before, or should it be?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Naxted, I think I would defer to Ms. Appleby to see what the status is on that, as whether or not there's been an appraisal done recently on that property.
Ms. Appleby.
I believe Councilmember Naxtet is referring to the lot that SOAR International Ministries will be leasing, and so there will be a subdivision first because part of that parcel it's on the runway. SOAR will be using the new lease form, so you'll note that the last time this round of appraisals was done was 2015, and so some of the parcels that were included in that batch have fallen away because they've converted to the new lease form. Because this appraisal is for leases that require the appraisal every 5 years to determine their lease rate. I suppose with the new SOAR lease, I did not include it because I was thinking that they were using the new lease form and it was not necessary. There is a provision in the contract that we, or the RF, somewhere near the contract or the RFP, it did say that we could do, if we did want to add or remove parcels, we could do a change order to the contractor. So any of the parcels could change, like if someone backs out of a lease, we don't need the appraisal, we could do a change order. That's what I know about the SOAR parcel and the list of parcels there.
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you. I'd like to add to that too. So what Ms. Appleby said is accurate, but because the subdivision has not been created yet, too, the subdivision hasn't been completed, the parcel that they would be leasing isn't created, so it's not possible to do an appraisal on it until that's done, and then at that point, they'd go through the new lease process that we have for these airport properties.
I could add one more. That they haven't completed the subdivision and the lease hasn't been signed, so that they're actually not, it's a pending lease currently, so there's not an existing lease.
And I don't recall the timeframe on this contract, if that they might overlap where the subdivision happens, and maybe I'm doing too many ifs, you know?
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Naxted. It likely wouldn't overlap, but as Ms. Appleby said, if we wanted to, there is the provision that we could add it if the timing worked out well for that parcel.
Any other discussion on resolution number 2019-75? Councilmember Navarre?
I just want to follow on Councilman Naxted's thought. I mean, if we're paying for an appraisal, and if the new lease and the subdivision, if they're already paying for a new subdivision and then they're going to have to pay for a new appraisal, and yet we're going through this process, is there not a way that we can alert them to say, if this was 2 parcels, what would it be, and get it in the same, and then we don't have to charge that too? I mean, it's kind of crazy. We're lumping it with all these others, but we're not. We know something's going to happen. It's just the timing of it, and yet we're gonna require 2 appraisal, one that we pay for and one that essentially gets charged again, if I'm understanding the transfer and subdivision. So with us being so close, why aren't we trying to anticipate this change? And if it's possible, I guess, if you don't need language change in this, but I would certainly support that kind of direction to the administration.
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Navarre. The intent certainly is only one appraisal. We wouldn't do it twice for sure. So if we can, from a timeline perspective, if we can make it happen, we'll try to do that, because you're almost certainly going to get the appraisal done less expensively through a mass appraisal like this than you would if you singled it out. So we'll try to do that, and we do have the ability to do that through the passage of this resolution. The thing we certainly would avoid, there's no situation would I expect that there'd be 2 appraisals done that would be redundant.
Any other discussion on resolution number 2019-75? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Peterkin?
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Councilmember Navarre?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet?
Yes.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes.
Motion passes.
We're now on item F1, resolution number 2019-7. Yes. Would you like to take a break? Yes.
Yep.
Let's take a 10-minute at ease. I'd like to call our meeting back to order. We're now on item F1, resolution number 2019-71. This is unfinished business. Repealing policy number 2017-2, supervisor subcommittee, sponsored by Councilmember Naxted. And clerk's note at its October 16th meeting, council postponed this item to November 6th meeting. A motion to adopt is on the floor. Councilmember Naxted.
Just before Mr. Navarro's got something he's going to present, so I just wanted to say that I brought this forward again because it's something I don't think we've been doing. It requires a meeting for this committee every quarter, so my first thought was to basically just eliminate it completely. Mr. Navarro has a suggestion memo and following this, so that I don't completely disagree with, so I thought I'd give you the floor.
Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you. Yeah, if everybody follows me, I do have the memo. So at this time, I would make an amendment in Section C, delete the words in the second line, at least once per quarter, and add as needed. Also in C, I know it's not shown there, but in the very last sentence where it says subcommittee shall, I would also move to delete shall and add the word should. Then in Section D, in the second paragraph, second line, where it goes, the supervisory subcommittee may make, delete the word recommendations and leave everything else as stated.
I'll second that.
What was your last one again, Councilmember Navarro? So I'm following this.
The last amendment?
Yeah.
It's in the, if I'm
under D?
understanding my paragraphs correctly, but the second paragraph of D.
Oh, second paragraph, okay.
And it's the second line in that paragraph at the very end of that line, recommendations and. So in other words, the subcommittee, it doesn't stop them from when they communicate to the council, but there was some concern by some council members, even though it's clear it makes recommendation, but I just want to make sure that the three members would just give a report to the council. The council would then make any decisions and recommendations as they choose. Thank you.
Any discussion on the amendment? Councilmember?
It was seconded by Councilmember Naxted.
Yes. Yeah, any discussion on the amendment? Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I support the amendments and appreciate the dialogue between council about it.
Mr. Bloom.
So before we vote on this, I'm a little unclear what's being voted on. I think this has to be postponed with a substitute brought forward. I wasn't able to get a substitute in the packet in time for advertising. Right now, the title says of the resolution is it's an amendment getting rid of the policy, and all the whereas clauses are in that regard. So I think, Mr. Navarro, Councilmember Navarro, if you read the memo, we're going to have to postpone for the next meeting in order to pass this. So I hate to do it, it's just a formality, but I think it's the way it has to be done.
I like the subcommittee the way it was without the amendment, so one more meeting now. We were actually going to meet earlier today, I think, originally. But with that, I would move to postpone until the December 4th meeting of the Kenai City Council,
At this point,
2019.
we still have an amendment on the floor, so I guess I'd ask you to withdraw the amendment and then vote to postpone.
Yeah, we can't vote on the amendment, Scott, and then still publish it? You're gonna bring back a separate action item with the policy?
Yes,
Is that the
I was just
intent?
gonna draft a substitute with
All right,
the
if it's
amendments
clear
in
to
it.
the public and everything, then with the concurrence of the second, I would withdraw my amendments.
Okay, the second concurred, and then now you can.
And
make a motion to
and at
postpone.
this time, then I would ask if it's necessary, I would ask the city attorney to make these amendments and have a clear policy in front of the council at the December 4th meeting for the council to act on changes to the policy.
And would we like to schedule that for a public hearing since it's significantly different than?
Absolutely.
And there's a second
Is there a
somewhere?
second on the motion to postpone?
Yeah,
Councilmember Glendening?
I'll second.
Very good. Any discussion on the motion to postpone? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Councilmember Navar?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtat?
Yes?
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Councilmember Glendening?
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin?
Yep.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We're now on item G6, action approval authorizing the issuance of requests for proposals for naming rights to the multi-purpose facility. Pleasure of council.
I'd like to move this forward and let me get to the top here. Do you have the number of that?
It's just an action approval.
Oh,
so-
okay.
Yeah, so,
Move to
if,
approve then.
yeah, if we get a motion to authorize and then we'll put it on the floor.
Okay, authorizing the insurance or regional request proposals for naming rights of the multipurpose facility.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, very good. Discussion on that? Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah, thank you, Bob, and thanks, staff. This is something that I think is very important. There's some history on it in here. Conoco had once had their name on the building, and that's expired, and the building has many needs right now. It has a lot of needs financially, and I think this would be one way to help allow the facility to bring in some more revenue beyond the ice fees and help take care of some of the things that are just really badly needed in that building.
Any other discussion on the motion to authorize issuance of a request for proposals naming rights for the multipurpose facility? Councilmember Glendening.
Yes, I support Councilor Peterkin's ideas. The naming rights to that facility would be significant not only to the holder of the naming rights, but also for the city. It would once again reiterate that this is a winter focal point for us. And the pecuniary reason for my supporting this is it will bring more cash to the entity also. Thank you.
Very good. Any other discussion? Councilmember Naxtat.
Request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? That action item is approved. Next, we have action approval approving a special use permit for Axtel Enterprises LLC to conduct fuel reduction activities on Tract A, Kenai Meadows, 2200 Redoubt Avenue, parcel 03901065, requested by administration. Councilmember Naxton.
I move we approve a SUP to Axle Enterprises for fuel reduction.
Any discussion? Comments? Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah, I'm curious how this come about. The borough did this very same thing on this lot in past, like, I don't know how many years ago, but I'm just curious why we're gonna spend this money if it's already been done.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So Axtel Enterprise is actually currently actively removing trees on the parcel directly to the east, and there's no cost to the city here. So this is an opportunity for us to get rid of dead and dying trees that are on the parcel at no cost to the city.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
I don't have any objection to this, but I was wondering what they were going to, it just says cutting and removal of dead or dying trees. Is it up to them to do whatever with that, with the wood that they cut then, I guess is my question.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yes, it's whatever Axtel Enterprises chooses to do with the wood after they remove it from the property is not something that we're going to dictate in the SUP. I would anticipate that they'll be selling it for firewood primarily.
And then one other question, it's sort of unrelated, but are there any other properties that you'd identify, or larger tracts that may need this same sort of fuel reduction, considering the fire season we just had?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I'm sure there are. We haven't actively looked to identify additional parcels, but if this is something that works well and there are entities out there that are willing to do this at no cost to the city, it's something that I certainly would like to pursue in the future.
Yeah, I was just, the reason I brought it up, I did have a person tell me about a city-owned property that would be kind of north of the ball fields there, between the gully, heading out to the inlet there, is that there was quite a few beetle kill there. So I think it's maybe a good idea to do assessment considering the fire, danger that could pose. Councilmember Glendinning?
Yeah, I have just a question for administration. So this is, in addition to the hue and cry over the beetles are coming, this is also part of our Firewise considerations, which is part of our comprehensive plan, part of our literature as far as we're going to manage our properties. Is this correct? It's something that we would entertain the idea of having a enhanced fuel reduction program. Am I on the right track with that?
Mr. Ostrander?
Through the mayor, council member Glendenning, yeah, I mean, this is something, as we've discussed, that fuel reduction with these dead and dying trees as this epidemic continues to go through our city is something that we're going to have to start looking at. And like I said, there's almost certainly going to be resources that are going to have to be spent at some point to do that. But yeah, an active assessment of what we've got out there, and then actively pursuing the reduction of that of those dead and dying trees is something that we're going to have to pursue.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the? I guess one other question I had is there so they're not going to clear cut it, assuming they're going to. Are they going to be the ones that are identifying trees they consider for removal, or would that be something administration or someone from the city would be doing?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. We're going to certainly, we're going to be out there inspecting the property during the activities. The intent is that they are only removing dead and dying trees at this point, so those need to be identified by Axtel, but we'll be also inspecting the property to make sure that they're not taking trees unnecessarily that aren't already infected by spruce bark beetle.
Okay, and just one last question. I didn't see an hours of operation there. Is there one in there, clause? I was just worried about complaints from neighbors.
I don't think there is hours of operation in the agreement. but that's something that we could certainly consider. I mean, this SUP has obviously not been executed yet, so we could add hours of operation to this. It's probably appropriate to do so.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion on the action approval?
Request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent has been requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, this action item has been approved. Next, we have action approval mayoral nominations of council liaisons for appointment to committees, commissions, sponsored by Mayor Gabriel. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to approve the mayoral nominations of council liaisons for appointment to committees and commissions and request unanimous consent.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, our liaison, our appointments to committees and commissions is approved. Next, we have item 9, G9, discussion, action, Bridges Community Resource Network mini grant request for its project Homeless Connect, brought to, sponsored by Mayor Gabriel. So the reason this is before you is this was a mini grant application for $500, and what it was for, that was our maximum grant request, and what it was for was to supply items for the Homeless Connect event that they have every January at the Sports Center. So they bring, homeless folks in there, people that are, in between places that are transitioning, and connect them with certain services, certain, hygiene items and things of that nature that they might have. We did approve this, was it last year, Jamie?
It was in 2017.
2017. So mini grant did do this last year, or in 2017. And the purpose of the mini grant is for, not to, continually fund a request. I mean, unless it's substantially expanding, that sort of thing. So this is an item, I don't have any necessarily objection to doing this, but it should be maybe in a different format if this is something that we would consider for our budget time and things like that, because since the mini grants, it didn't really qualify in my opinion for the terms of what we set up for the mini grant, but might be a worthwhile cause to put before council to consider is the reason it's here, but also to give you thought about these types of application of exactly where they should fit into the budget. And Ms. Hines and I had a conversation about this, and she has some ideas that I think probably might be appropriate at budget time to discuss some of these other grants, other agencies, things like that. But I'll just leave that as a teaser, I guess, at this point. So the point was just to put this before you, see if it was something that council was open to. If you read the application, you can, the purpose of it was, Bridges has focal point of nurturing personal growth, but when you look at what they're spending on, so basically the items that they would, the $500 grant would be from 3 Bears, cars would be toilets, toiletries, infant formula, baby food, things of that nature. That would be something that would be provided for at the Homeless Connect event. So with that, that kind of gives you a little bit of an overview. And they did say on number 5 that if they apply for a mini grant before they put no, but they actually have. So, and I think at that time we actually, if you remember, we did request as a condition of the mini grant that they come back to council to give us some of their findings there, because they collect data on homeless, geographically where folks are from. They try to do the best job they can. That's sort of a transient community, so, but it is good information. And they did come back and after that and present to council, so, anyway, I'll open it up for discussion, but that's why it's here instead of do the mini grant.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
I would point out that they did recognize before we brought it to their attention, and that email is included in your packet, that they had, it was just a different person applying for it this
Yeah.
year, and she didn't realize, so that email is included in your packet.
Councilmember Navarre.
Thank you. I'll move at this time, if there's money in the mini grant budget, that we donate $500 to Bridges Community Resource Network for the project Homeless Connect.
I'll second that.
And if I could, I'll speak to it.
Councilmember Navarre.
I have to agree with all the statements that Mayor Gabriel made, and that they did come back to us, and I do agree that in our budget session, and maybe the city manager can make himself a note that this be an ongoing. This is a big community event that we're doing, and that's a small amount to deal with. And for us to participate with all the other nonprofits and churches and everything else, even the foundation gives money to this every year. It gives us, a lot of times, you bring all of them in and you get a lot of resources. Like you say, they get a survey, and they ask what some of the issues and concerns and other things are. And I think that's healthy for our community to continue to help out with that baseline information, as well as help provide and be part of this service that not only affects residents within our limits, but in the surrounding areas. And so I would ask for your support for sure. Thanks.
Yes, I too will be supporting this. If you really read through the mini grant application that says "Together We Can," there's more information about Project Homeless Connect. A person experiencing homelessness can receive assistance from multiple service providers all under the same roof. In other words, what it does, it provides an individual who finds themselves, or family who finds themselves in this situation, a means to find a path forward. It doesn't indicate permanence of situation. It just gives them the necessary tools to rebuild what they have lost and move forward. And I believe we all subscribe to that theme and theory. And having said that, I will support the grant request. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the grant request?
Request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the $500 mini grant, well, let's just call it grant, to Bridges Community Resource Network is approved. We're on item G10 now, discussion personal use fishery capital improvement projects sponsored by administration. So I guess I'll turn it over to Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So the request here is administration is asking council to approve the 4 projects that administration has identified for use of the grant funds that we've received for North and South Beach improvements, to take those to Parks and Rec Commission and the Harbor Commission for their consideration, and then based on their recommendations, bringing it back to council for your consideration at the December 4th meeting. Just so you know the process that we've gone through, as you know, there was a grant that we received back in 2013 for $1.9 million. That's the grant that purchased the Dragseth Mansion and the property on South Beach. The original grant language only allowed for improvements on the South Beach, and actually over the last couple of years, we've been working to try to get that grant language changed. With the help of Representative Knopp this year, we actually did get the grant language changed that now allows us to utilize the remaining grant funds that's just short of $800,000 on both the south and the north beach. So Mr. Castamore, Terry Eubank, and I worked on a matrix that would determine which of these projects made the most sense to spend this money on. So Mr. Castamore did go out to all city departments and ask for a list of possible projects that could be, these funds could be used for. You can see in the memo, these are, there's a narrative on each one of those. After we received those, we generated the matrix, and if you'll look on page 102, it actually shows the scoring rubric for that matrix. And this was important. We spent a lot of time trying to make sure that we looked at this in a way that would benefit not only the PU fishery itself, but one of the important things we wanted to look at were projects that would benefit the residents of the city year-round. You can see that the highest scoring element of the matrix was how the project would improve the quality of life for residents. So not only were we looking for projects that would qualify under the grant, which was to benefit the PU fishery, but we also wanted projects that would benefit the residents year-round. So again, we went through all of these projects. We scored each one of them. You can see the scoring on page 101. The vault restrooms was the one that scored the highest with a score of 167, all the way down to the lowest scoring was South Beach parking area of 51. So we took the scoring matrix results, and then based on that, we came up with a recommendation that's in the memo, which the first project that we recommend would be the vault restrooms. Interestingly enough, this is relevant to some of the discussions we had tonight. This project itself would not only benefit residents year-round in that there would be these restrooms that would be available for them at any time of the year, but it also does save money for the PU fishery annually. The total savings of this is approximately $11,000 that we'd see in annual savings to the PU fishery, which if that $11,000 savings was realized this year, we would have actually been in the black for this year. So the vault restrooms is something that we felt qualified, and it was the highest scoring of the projects that were included. The second one is Spruce Campground, which is, and just so you know, there are detailed drawings of each one of these after this if you want to look at it. But Spruce Campground is as you're going down Spruce, that city-owned piece of property, beautiful piece of property, 2 acres on the right side. The proposal would be to build a campground in that area. We don't have a campground right now currently in the city. It's something that we've heard consistently that people want a campground here. Right now, if you have an RV and you want to come to Kenai, the only place you can stay is Walmart. So this would provide a campground. Mr. Castamore has a vision that this is going to be the premier campground in the state of Alaska. It might take us a while to get there, but this money can get us started for the first phase of this. It also includes the acquisition, hopefully, of private property directly adjacent to that, another 2-acre parcel, so it'd be a total of 4 acres for that Spruce Campground. The owner of that private property has come to the city in the past and requested that the city consider purchasing it, so I think it's something that we could accomplish with these funds as well. So that's the second. The third is permanent restrooms at the Little League. That would also create cost savings during the PU fishery as well, and it would also, the Little League spends just over $5,000 a year maintaining those facilities, so they would actually save money as well. And then the last one on here is something that we have to do is the South Beach shacks that we have. We've been using them for I'm not sure how many years now, but they are in dire need of replacement. It's not an expensive proposition, but it's something that is going to need to be done. We can either do it with funds out of the PU fishery revenues or with these grant funds, either one. So those 4 are the ones that we're recommending. Total cost of those, I believe, is estimated at $740,000. We do have $786,000 in the grant right now, but because of some of the uncertainty, particularly with Spruce Campground, that's a very rough estimate at this point. But we think we can accomplish all 4 of these, hopefully, with these funds. And again, the request for tonight is that we have a discussion about these. If there's questions based on how we scored this or any of the projects specifically, we can go through those. But ultimately, the administration would like to take this to both the Parks and Rec Commission and the Harbor Commission, get their input, their recommendation, and then bring it back to council at your December 4th meeting for your final consideration. Thank you.
Councilmember Navarre.
First question is on the bathrooms. And maybe I heard it wrong when we had public discussion. There was some issue dealing with the cost of this PU fishery. And essentially, the porta potties cost us $100,000 a year. I don't see the numbers. It says a savings on the north of $6,000 a year and on the south $325 per year. So are we not, I mean, I don't, we're not really, we're still gonna have a number of porta potties?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Navarre. The plan is that this would preclude us having to have porta potties on North Beach. As far as the cost estimate associated with that, I was not the one that came up with that. Mr. Castmore might be able to shed some light on to how he came up with that estimate for cost savings.
Mr. Castmore.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. The 100,000 number that you keep hearing thrown around is more attributable to the cost of all porta potties and all dumpsters. And so the dumpster service that we have.
Solid waste.
And in fact, the porta potties are the least significant portion of that cost. And that's why the numbers you're seeing don't match that 100,000. So we took a look at the actual expenditures last year for all the porta potties on North Beach, which is the number you saw there. We pulled the actual expenditures for the porta potties at Little League, and those are the actual numbers. And then annually, we put one porta potty on South Beach for our shack attendant to use, because they're there 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. This would reduce one porta potty on South Beach. So it wouldn't be significant on South Beach, but it would have the added benefit of providing, restrooms when you're over there. I know I take my family to South Beach on a regular basis, and it'd be nice to have a restroom to use.
And I presume.
Just a follow-up question on that. So was there any discussion of the city buying their own porta potties? In other words, that could not only be used for the PU fishery, but when we have the event there at the Leaf Hansen Memorial Park for Memorial Day, we could supply some there when we, I know even during the PU fishery on the big kind of open space in Millennium Square that's used where everybody goes because we don't have a campground area for that special big weekend. We could include some have some that we could utilize in that area, and so on and so forth. I'm just wondering if there was any discussion on that.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Navarre. We did discuss alternatives to the vault restrooms. One of the things we discussed was one of those. It's essentially a tow-behind restroom that you'll see. I know the city of Soldotna has one that you can tow around and you can put it in different areas to support events. Typically, those don't require, but it's best if they have water and sewer hookup when those are at the event. The actual purchase of porta potties was not something that we discussed in any great detail, but the problem with the tow-behind type bathrooms that, you can get them in different configurations, but you can have some that have, multiple different toilets in each one. But for the example, on North Beach, the problem that we had down there is there's no availability of water and sewer readily available. So while they might have worked in Millennium Square or on the park strip, they wouldn't have worked down on North Beach very effectively. The porta potties potentially could, but with the porta potties, you don't get the benefit of the year-round availability of the vault restrooms that you do if they're permanent.
Why wouldn't you have the year-round if you owned a porta potty? Why wouldn't it be able to be used year-round?
Mr. Oster.
Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Navarre. Well, I mean, I suppose if you left the porta potties out all winter long, potentially you could. But the vault restrooms, because they are permanent, they would be there all the time. I mean, we would have to determine what the location would be. I suppose if you wanted to put a porta potty down there, you could year-round, but
No, I'm talking about one that not only you move in the summertime and you use for special events, but ones that you could also, you know, you would move them out of there. You wouldn't just leave them there. It would be there, but that's year-round. I mean, at different events, even in a wintertime event, if they needed to be, they could be put out that day temporarily. But anyway, if we haven't, I mean, I'm trying to look. I'm glad we're saving some money, so we're looking at that. Now, can you just clear exactly where the Spruce campground is? I'm.
Right here. So here is going down to the beach. Here is the water base system. It's right here in that space right there.
Boy, you're talking about some prime property for that. I'll agree it'd be a nice location, but it's probably also a very nice location for some condos and some other stuff. You know, I'm for a campground. I guess I'm a little concerned that that's the site we picked. That's the highest and best use. It certainly coincides with our other area across, you know, where you can come down the trail and probably almost connect and do some things, but I just have some concern that we're making the best decision in that. I guess I'll support these, but I guess I'd like the administration to just flush out some other options, or if in fact you did, maybe you can speak to that. I mean, we've moved them, not that that's the spot you'd go, but we moved them down by the ball fields. You know, not to take away our lease property from the big trucks and that, but at some point that could be a whole area. We've even had some homeless issues up in there that we could incorporate that area and make it, you know, the camping area and have some flexibility for more area. Because it still services the dip net fishery, so its use would be, but I guess I would ask, it's a great location, and it might be a selling point that I see now where Mr. Castamore said it might be one of the most beautiful, and I'll go look at it again and a few other things, but I can tell you, I've had people visualize it and of what they were going to do with that other parcel that's privately owned at this point, and it wasn't for a campground. And so, anyway, I just wanted that. Those are my only concerns. Otherwise, I would. I don't have any problem.
Councilmember Naxa.
I think what Mr. Navarre said, it's good for discussion. It'd be something that we'll probably discuss when it actually comes back. I think right now, if I understand, we're really looking to send this on to Parks and Rec and the Harbor Commission for their comments, you know, and see what they come up with, and I don't have a problem doing that. I don't want to just send the 4. I like to send all of them. If we're actually asking for their comments and input, I think before I would make a motion, I think we ought to send them the recommendations from administration, but also the matrix and all the other possibilities and everything, and they may look at something a little differently. It may be of value. It is also very likely that they'll concur with what administration has, but I don't want to, if I understood it correctly, I don't want to just send the 4. I like to send the whole thing, and just like we got here, here's administration's recommendations. What do you guys think? And have it come back to us, and then we go on and we can further with that discussion that Mr. Navarre was just having with us.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, I have a question. Is there a timeline for this decision tree? Do we have to make up our mind, or can we go a little bit longer? I think some of these would be time sensitive, like for design and installation of the restrooms. Camp Spruce Campground, maybe that could be put off just a little bit. But what I'm trying to spit out, I guess, here is that I really appreciate the menu and selection that we have that the administration presented to us, and I think each of them in their own way are worthy. I just would like to know that is December the 4th, is that the imperative date, or can we have it, say, go into January? For example, Harbor Commission just had its meeting. For administrative reasons, timing, this did not get on their agenda. What I did do is under public comments, I read from my packet under public comments to the Harbor Commission, and I wasn't allowed to ask for approval or any action, but I could see nods of approval that they were glad and grateful that we were considering these type of things. The Harbor Commissions and Parks and Rec, they do advise us, and as I understand it, the next meeting for the Harbor Commission is the 6th of January, where they're going to discuss the Title 11 revisions, but this could be bolted onto that agenda also. So that's a wordy way of saying, would you accept my comments for,
Mr. Ostrander,
would you accept my comments for, general approval from the Harbor, or do you want specific recommendations from them?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Glendenning, I recognize that the Harbor Commission schedule that their set one didn't allow them to do this. My assumption was that if they felt that it was important for them to provide their input, they might want to set up a special meeting to consider it. The only time sensitivity here is that the grant expires at the end of the fiscal year, June 30th. Now, we have consistently been able to get it extended in the past years. There's been some indication that administratively at the state level that might change, and getting grant extensions is going to become more difficult. So ideally, we'd get everything done before the end of the fiscal year. Now, in reality, some of these grant funds may not be able to be expended before the end of June 30th. We're going to do everything we can to do that, and we will be applying for an extension. Typically, that happens in the month of November. So if no administrative changes happen at the state level and they allow us to extend it beyond June of 2020, then there really is no time sensitivity. But because there's some uncertainty surrounding that, we wanted to keep this moving and hopefully expend these dollars as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your overview. I would suggest then that perhaps we could rely on Parks and Rec for their specific input, and maybe just accept the idea of Councilor Peterkin and myself that there was general acceptance of this menu from the Harbor Commission. If it turns to be such that the decisions aren't made at the December 4th meeting, the January 6th meeting of the Harbor Commission could include this. Would that expedite your decision ability?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Glendenning. Yeah, and again, if the Harbor Commission would really like to provide their input, and I think there is value there, certainly, they could set a meeting for for this month, that, you know, I know they don't currently have one scheduled, but they could make a special meeting if they wanted to consider this.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, and it is on the agenda for the Parks and Recreation Commission, a discussion for tomorrow evening here, so it'll be on their agenda. I also, of course, support sending it to them and it coming back to us. And just on a related subject and to our earlier discussion during unscheduled public comment, there's the personal use fishery report in the packet. And I was wondering if that was going to be going to the commissions and if we might have a discussion on that maybe in January. You know, I know you don't have you're not recommending any changes, but you know, I don't know, maybe if council may be interested in having a discussion on the personal use fishery generally, and I had you know, some comments, and maybe we could do that at a future time. So I don't know, are you intending to have that be a discussion item for the commissions, or?
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Vice Mayor Malloy, we were going to provide it to commissions for their information and certainly be available to discuss it with them if they want. I hadn't planned on including it as a discussion item with council, but if you guys would like to put that on agenda and discuss it in more detail, I'd be willing to do that as well. My intent was just to include it here for information, and if it did generate questions, we could explore that further.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Well, first of all, I love this. This is great. And we need to do all these things, but I like the four if they fit in the budget. But I also think that, I know the Harbor Commission would want to be involved in this, so I think we'd be probably willing to reach out to them and ask if they could meet in time to be a part of the process, because this is yeah, I think we could have a special meeting. And I'm not the chair, but I know Mike, I'm sure that we'd be happy to do that. The PU fishery is big on Harbor Commission. I mean, that's like one of our biggest topics, and I just feel like this is kind of related to that, and it's right at the beach, and I think they're all going to be in favor and like this, but I think it'd be good for them to be included. So I'm happy to help orchestrate that with Jamie if we need to, and just my 2 cents is this is good stuff. This is what we need to be doing, and we should buy that property right away, to me, so no one else buys it. But thanks.
Any other discussion? Did you get enough direction there, Mr. Ostrander?
I did, Mayor Gabriel, in particular to Councilmember Nacksted's comments. We'll make sure that the commission see everything that you saw tonight in their packet.
Okay, very well. So I guess, Councilmember Glendening.
Yeah, just one more thing. Just for housekeeping or process, it's entirely acceptable and perhaps preferred that for items such as this, that perhaps commissions, committees actually could see this information before we do. It's not proprietary to us. In fact, they do advise us, and it's just another set of eyes. And I know I'm better informed and can do a better job when I listen to the comments and discussion that our commissions and committees have. So we'll work on timing issues in the future, and thank you for recognizing that.
Thank you. Next, we're on Commission Committee Reports, Council on Aging.
Council on Aging. We did not have a meeting since our last council meeting, and the next meeting was at the 14th, I believe, of November. But what we did have was a work session. And the work session involved basically rules of the road for the senior center, and to a minor consideration, the Vintage Point. What the Council on Aging is working on is just having actual codes of conduct, a general term, for the senior center. What this will do, it will help and support the staff and the manager of the facility in maintaining a even keel for managing, how can we say, the varied needs and demands and impacts of all those people. During this meeting on the 10th, they began to develop a matrix or a list of concerns that they did have. They have some examples from other entities that address this issue. I believe we have similar matrix considerations, say with our library and with our youth center. And what Attorney Bloom suggested, and I concur with that, and have reached out to the manager of the facility there, is that at their next meeting, which is November the 14th, that we could ask Attorney Bloom just to come and kind of look at what we've been working on, and perhaps he could give us some guidance, and perhaps even take the ideas that have been proffered and help the city administration come up with, my words, the code of conduct for that entity. There's not really one in existence now, and something of a more formal presentation, more formal rule that could be laid out to people would really help the administration of that facility. Thank you.
Airport Commission?
Since our last meeting, we have not had a meeting, and the next meeting will be on November the 14th, and Tim Navarre will be the liaison for that.
Harbor Commission?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll walk through our meeting, but I want to first make a comment that what Jim said previous to this was being able to share some things before it comes to council, if council's okay with that, might be handy, because we just met 2-3 days ago at the Harbor Commission, and had we had this on our agenda, then we could have already discussed it, not be calling a special meeting. The other thing is the DIPNet results. I know the people on the Harbor Commission were really anxious to know what they were, and it was kind of like waiting for us to see them first, and it was just a couple days ago. So I don't know that would be a big deal or not, but I think it's good. If it's just a few days, I don't really think, I wouldn't care. I don't know how the rest of the council feels, but something to talk about in the future with the timing of meetings, especially with the Harbor Commission, where in the winter we don't typically have a lot of topics because the rivers kind of shut down quite a bit. And so anyway, that's my 2 cents on that. So we discussed, well, Jim's going to talk about Title 11 in a minute, so I'll leave that alone, but we discussed that. We discussed the harbor and dock facility survey results. We got a lot of information from our survey, and it's really good information. I believe it's online. I know it's in the packets. It's very interesting. There's a lot of dialogue, and people were pretty open about sharing about their concerns of the harbor, which I view it as a success. I think in some of the suggestions from the commission were that we kind of get a consensus of what it all means, because we just kind of have all the results but no real consensus. So I think we're maybe headed that way. One of the other things was monitoring and counting fish from city beaches, which we discussed. And then some of the discussion, I believe from Scott's report, he gave us some updates on the dock and things. And one of the bigger topics was sounds like we have somebody interested in possibly taking the dock next year, but there's concern about keeping it open to the public, because we have some fishermen that were able to use our cranes this year because we got it worked out where that could happen, and we don't want to just maybe rent it all to one person next year, and then our fishermen that were using the cranes this year can't use them. So there's some things that are gonna need to be worked out, and Scott's doing a really good job of keeping us up to date on that, and appreciate that, Scott. Yeah, sharing the dock. But Jim, do you wanna talk about Title 11?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Peterkin. Our attorney, Scott Bloom, put quite a bit of effort into this revision of Title 11, in fact, and so has the Harbor Commission. I mean, we were working on this clear back when Councilor Malloy was the liaison. And what we did is we received the rework of Title 11 from Attorney Bloom, and the commission is going to chew on it over the next month and have a meeting scheduled for the 6th of January. And the only thing on the agenda as of now is the Title 11. And basically what we are doing is the revisions to Title 11 address procedures and process that are no longer applicable because they address the transfer of tidelines from the state to the city in 1977, and all of these considerations were completed in 1981. What remains are the more modern considerations of our waterfront, and we are pivoting now to the idea of assisting with insight and comments for the PU fishery. We're talking about water safety. We're talking about management of our infrastructure, specifically the city dock. We have a dock that has great capabilities. It's able to handle large ships. Yeah, I'll find my picture. There it is, right here. There we go. Have here a picture of 110-foot Bering Sea crabber. This was in the past 5 years. It tied up to our dock. Okay, to have this as a practical matter, we have to get that silt out of there. And I know our Public Works Director, our Harbert Masters, is beginning work on that. Brian has some insight as to how this can be managed. The Nilchik, for example, has their harbor dredged. Homer does. Dillingham does. They have a riverine harbor such as we do. But anyway, what we're doing is we're with the Title 11 is that we are reworking a lot of the old considerations and just taking things that we had to work so hard on years ago when your father was on the commission, just ascribing them to the policies, procedures, and means of managing these properties with our planning and zoning and things that are in code presently. So anyway, just to reiterate, we are going to now pivot to the modern concerns. Basically, in a nutshell, it is marketing and presenting our harbor, our waterfront, in a positive way. That not only it's an attribute to the city, but is a economic benefit to the citizens of the Kenai Peninsula. Thank you.
Thank you. Parks and Rec Commission?
Parks and Rec meets tomorrow night, and Bob's all learned up. He'll be doing that tomorrow.
Very good. Planning and Zoning Commission?
Yes, I will, and Henry will be doing the next meeting, which is November 13th. But the Parks and Recreation Commission, the Kenai Planning and Zoning Commission met October 30. They had a scheduled public comment. This was from Jennifer LeMay, who's with LeMay Engineering and Consulting. It was, a public hearing presentation and discussion of the update to the City of Kenai Local Hazard Mitigation Plan. And the draft of the updated plan has been posted to the city's website. And there's going to be a second public hearing, which will be at the City Council at our December 4th meeting, and she'll be here to make the similar presentation to Council about the update to the Local Hazard Mitigation Plan. There was a couple of plats that were, basically all approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. First one was a plat in Valhalla Heights subdivision on Phillips Drive for the Cates, and it was to vacate a lot line to create a one larger lot. The larger lot was 1.167 acres. There was no ownership change. The next one was also for the Cates on different property that they own, the first property is undeveloped. This second property, again, they were vacating a lot line to create one larger lot. This lot would be 1.966 acres, and there is a home on the lot. And there was a discussion about the movement to larger lot sizes in that subdivision. There also was another plat. This is for the Whites, and this is across the highway, same subdivision, but on the other side of the highway, just property that's right abutting on the highway. This again was to vacate a lot line to create one larger lot, and the lot size for this one was 1.891 acres. This property is zoned limited commercial. There was a shop on one lot and a residence and shed on the other lot and a common driveway. And so they approved the vacating of the lot line for that, and that was pretty much the business that was done at the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Beautification Committee?
Their last meeting was in October, and I believe their next meeting, if it goes along with what they did last, will be either the 7th or the 14th of January of 2020. The which day? 14th of 2020.
Okay. Mini Grant Steering Committee, we did have an application we took action on tonight for the Homeless Connect purchases. I also wanted to point out, I missed I wasn't here for the last meeting, so I didn't give a report on this, but mini grant that we'd given prior, it was about the first part of November, I believe, or end of October, that we gave a grant for the, actually it was the first part of October, for the, to Mount View Elementary kids for a pumpkin paint supplies for the Pumpkin Festival, and it was like $200, and that went really well. I mean, the Hillcorp was there, set up the fence for them, or set up a little canopy tent for them. And so right outside the mazes, they had some tables set up with some volunteers that were helping the kids paint the pumpkins that they got. And it was a really big hit. It went over really well. So what else it did is, in years past, we had people go, or kids go in there, grab their pumpkins and head out. It gave the kids an opportunity to, kind of hang out, commingle with other kids and parents and stuff to do that. So that was a really neat idea and a good concept. And so that's it as far as my mini grant steering committee report. On the report of the mayor, I'd like to first of all thank Bob for filling in for me last meeting. I had a emergency deal I had to leave on, and you must have made an impression because you got voted vice mayor this evening. So I don't, but thanks for that. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Again, like I said, I attended the outside of the mini grant, the Pumpkin Festival. I thought went over really well this year. A lot of participation. It was kind of neat the way they did the maze there with the straw bales, and I had my grandkids over there, and they had a great time, and had the live music there, and it was good. Good job, Bob. On the 23rd of October, I delivered a joint proclamation at the Chamber for Domestic Violence Awareness Month with the Vice Mayor of the City of Soldotna. And I did miss Mary Jo Joyner's retirement, and also Stacy Millette. That was kind of a bummer. I want to thank Vice Mayor Navarre for saying a few words at Mary Jo Joyner's. Apparently, he was able to do that. I was planning on attending and just couldn't make it over that day. So I want to wish them luck and thank them for their service to the city. Last Saturday night, I went to the American Cancer Society fundraiser, and it sounds like they did pretty good. It was over Soldana. They saw several council members over there, and it was a great time and in a good cause, and it sounds like they made a little north of $35,000 net, so good job. So as some of you may or may not heard, I think it was on October 24th, the Board of Fish met, or we haven't had that since our previous meeting, have we, Paul? Because I missed the last meeting.
No, that was after the last meeting.
Yeah, so I'm trying to get my dates kind of messed up, but so since our last meeting, the Board of Fish met, and of course they were instructed by the Ombudsman's office to reconsider their vote that they took at the AYK meeting I think it was last January, to move the meeting back to Anchorage. The Ombudsman's office ruled that they didn't give enough public notice. They didn't follow their own practice as far as public notice goes. So they rescheduled the vote for this work session they had, and not surprisingly, it didn't change anything. But they also addressed the policy of the rotating meeting policy, which they had adopted when they had voted to move the meeting to Anchorage the first time, and they voted, I think that was unanimous, to rescind that policy. So that policy is no longer there, even though I had a discussion with the city manager about this, and there was really they weren't bound by that. It was a policy that suggested that they, rotate those meetings. So it was, I thought it was a little bit of a slap in the face to other communities other than Anchorage, and totally disappointing. That I got to wonder if we're ever going to see a 2020 meeting or a Upper Cook County Board of Fish meeting down here, but it's getting pretty frustrating, to say the least. I wanted to let everybody know that you should have a copy of the city manager's contract in front of you, something to take home and look over, because that will be on our agenda for the first meeting in December, is to consider the renewal of the city manager's contract. And then the last thing I wanted to do was just thank Mr. Navarre for his work as my vice mayor for the last, I think, 3 years. Didn't seem like that long, but I think it's my first term. I think you're vice mayor every year, so I appreciate all your time and willingness to fill in, sometimes on short notice, and you handled yourself well and represented the city well, and I want to thank you for that. And with that, we'll go to the administration report. City manager.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. A couple things tonight. Back in mid-October, it's been a while since we met. Group of us from the city, Terry Eubanks, Stormy Brown, Christine Cunningham, Jamie, and I met with our new marketing firm. We discussed marketing strategy for the city. It was really 2 days in a row that we spent a significant amount of time with them. Their marketing expertise was evident in those meetings. I mean, it was clear that with their direction, I think we're going to come up with some pretty amazing things to do to market the city. So they're working on refining what the marketing plan is. They're going to bring that back to the city and actually present to the council at your meeting of January 15th. So that's something to look forward to. I'm really excited for some of the stuff that they're going to bring forward. From the 19th to the 23rd, so there's like a Saturday to a Tuesday, I was at the ICMA conference in Nashville. I'd like to thank council for budgeting the dollars that allow me to go to this conference. It's the one conference I go to every year. This year was the biggest ever. So it's international city managers all over the world. There's over 5,500 attendees there. A lot of really valuable classes that I go to there. We had some specifically about fire and police department management this year, leadership. Also opportunities to find services and software that can benefit the city in the future. So again, I thank the council for allowing me to go to that. It's definitely worthwhile. As Mayor Gabriel said, the Board of Fish met on the 24th. I did, on my way back from Nashville, I stayed another night in Anchorage and went to that Board of Fish meeting. I was happy to see that 2 of the most recent appointees did vote to have it in Kenai, so the vote was 4-3. So I think there's always hope, but maybe there's a little more hope that at the next time that they vote, which will be in October of next year for the UCI 2023 meeting, that they might consider moving it to the Kenai-Soldotna area. There are, as Mayor Gabriel said again, there were 2 retirements last week, Stacy Millette and Mary Jo Joyner. She was library director. Stacy Millette was with Animal Control. Both were excellent employees and will be missed. Really 2 good parties here in these chambers for both of them last week. On Halloween, I met with Alaska Waste. They've handled our garbage services for many, many years. There's a new competitor that's moving into town. So the city is going to be going out for an RFP to look to competitively have folks compete for those services. That'll probably be happening in the next couple of months. Last night, I did have a meeting with all of the officers of the Kenai Police Department to go over the suggested changes or the recommendations that I'm going to bring to council on December 4th. It's the second time I've met with all the officers there. There was a lot of good interaction with them. Certainly a lot of feedback from them on what they feel is important to those officers. As I think Vice Mayor Malloy mentioned, the DIPNet report is in your packet tonight. Also, in regards to some of the comments that we heard earlier from the Harbor Commissioner, I have talked to Commissioner Doug Vincent Lang about the possibility of adding a DIPNet fee onto those to their permits. He told me that at this time the governor's not supportive of including that on there. However, I have reached out to our legislative delegation to see if they can sponsor legislation for this next upcoming session to include that. And I told the commissioner that I was going to do that, and he said, I think that's a good opportunity to have that discussion further once that legislation is in front of the legislature. And then the last thing is bluff erosion. I did confirm this week that the request to start the design process is actually on the desk of the Assistant Secretary of the Army of Civil Works, so all it takes at this point is a signature by that individual to start the design process. So I'm hopeful that that's going to happen in the very near future. And that's my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the city? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, just a heads up I gave Paul earlier. I was looking at the purchase orders between 2,500 and 15 grand. And there was the Kenai Watershed Forum for the Kenai River Bacteria Monitoring Professional Services, 10,777. And Paul promised me he'd have a rendition of what that money went for.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Glendenning. Yeah, so I looked into that today, actually. That should actually state 5,000. The entire amount of the PO was included there, so it was actually only 5,000. But it is that pass-through grant for bacteria testing. The 5,000 that the council appropriated during the budget is for the baseline testing, not the bacterial testing. But this is a $5,000 payment for the bacterial testing that's a pass-through grant from DEC.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Just to follow up then, this program of the bacteria monitoring, et cetera, that's going to be sunsetted soon, right? We have years and years and years and years of data, and the funds maybe could be expended more prudently elsewhere.
Mr. Ostrander.
Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Glendenning. I've gotten indications that they're going to be sunsetting. I haven't gotten any formal notice that they are.
Thank you.
Any other questions, city manager? I do have one. Are we gonna be submitting a, capital, projects request to our legislative delegation or have anything on the slate for that? I know there's not a lot of money, but there's a thought that maybe we should have, some, Mr. Ostrander.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yes, it's something that we do need to get in, the administration needs to get in front of council here relatively soon. Based on last year, they actually did ask for some capital projects once the session started, so we'll probably try to expand on what we provided last year to include some smaller project in case there is a small capital budget.
Very good, thank you. Any other questions of the city manager? Seeing none, city attorney, Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Members of council, I have nothing to report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the city attorney? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, just to confirm the understanding, you'd be available for the Council on Aging in November, their meeting over there?
I believe so, yes.
Thank you.
Is it on the 19th during the Hill Corp Turkey?
I believe it's on the 14th.
Oh, dang it. Any other questions of the city attorney? Seeing none, city clerk, Ms. Hines.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, members of council. I'm currently recruiting for committee and commission members. Their terms expire on December 31st, so letters are going out soon to those who are expiring to see if they're interested in continuing for another 3 years, and we're also have several vacancies that we're trying to recruit for. I'm attending Alaska Association for Municipal Clerks Conference coming up November 16th through the 19th. And I'll be staying in Anchorage, serving on the Alaska Municipal League Assistance Committee through the AML conference. And just wanted to point out that I have sympathy now for the mayor for reading all of the titles. And I think I might have a conversation with the city planner on lots and blocks and parcel numbers. And just wanted to point out to council members Glendenning and Peterkin that we do have a policy in place that speaks to what goes on what we can put on the commission agendas without council approval. So I'll print it out for you guys and you can review it, and if you guys want to change it, you're certainly welcome to.
In a nutshell, what is it?
Ms. Hines?
That the meeting agenda, committee commissions, action under applicable municipal code prior to final action by the council as distinguished from advisory recommendations will be referred to the respective body prior to any final council action, and the city council by motion may refer any other item to be placed on an agenda seeking recommendation.
Any other questions of the city clerk?
Yeah, does that preclude, say in this in the instant, the harbor of getting the information for their Monday meeting prior to our meeting?
Well, it's not in code that those items get sent to those commissions, so council can send it to them, but the policy says that if it's in code, administration can send it to them. If it's not in code, then council would send it to them. I mean, that's how I interpret it.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
So just following up on that, it's prior to final action, which we haven't taken final action. In following up on, on the recommendations for the grant expenditures for DIPNet, but following up on that, there was a discussion regarding setting up a special meeting, and I don't recall that. Is that something that the clerk's able to do, with the chair? If there's a need, we don't have to give a direction about that, so that if Councilmember Peterkin and the chair can call a special meeting so they can deal with that or look at that before our December 4th meeting, you could facilitate that?
Yes, we can facilitate special meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of the city clerk? Seeing none, we'll go to citizens' comments. Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to discuss? Ms. Nelson.
Ma'am Nelson, in reference to the January 15th marketing entity that would be coming out, the Art Center would be very interested in that, and especially in relation to Old Town in general, and also having to do, I don't know, probably wouldn't come up in that, but talk to Henry just a little bit about Councilman Naxted, rather, signage and Old Town and the importance of improving that situation. And just as a small detail, some of your pumpkin painters took part in the mural painting. They spent many hours face painting those kids and so forth and so on. And from there, they went to paint this mural for 4 or 5 days straight, practically. And also, the bigger item is that recently, what's his name? I can't remember. Anyway, Blazy, is it Randall? You all probably know. Anyway, Blazy Construction and a electrician and the annual fire inspection, all folks, guy, man, person, came to the center and went through the building, and Blazy is in on coming up with that final number that it would take to redo the back part of the building. The information that you have and that we have so far is based on square footage from Kluge's office, and this would be more comprehensive. So don't have it yet, who knows, just keep waiting and waiting and waiting till there's finally a number. That's it.
Okay.
Questions?
Any questions, Ms. Nelson? Thanks, Mary Ann. Is there anybody else from the general public who'd like to address the council at this time? Seeing none, we'll move to council comments. Let's start with Councilmember Naxted.
Thank you. I did attend Mary Jo's retirement party, which was on Halloween, and everybody, I would say, was appropriately dressed for that. It was quite a party, and she was actually the Queen of Hearts. She was the queen of the party, and I did message her later, and the next day, I just want to relay her statement was, it was the best. You know, and I think it really showed just how much the city really cared for her, and I think she's a very special person too. So it was the best. So thank you guys for the city for doing that for that special person who is also a very good director here. Also, I did spend the last year with Parks and Rec. That was I appreciate the work that Bob does with his crew and all of that. They just run a pretty tight ship and everything, and it's very vast, lots of details, and you're a very detailed guy. And that's a good thing about moving us around from commission to commission. We get to see that, and also the commission itself works very good. They had lots of great ideas, lots of energy. Very much appreciated my time last year with you guys, so thank you much. This last weekend, I also attended the fundraiser that benefited the Kenai Peninsula Relay for Life, and enjoyed that. I think it was the first annual fundraiser for that, and it was well done, and I'm sure that it'll grow from there. The last thing I'd like to talk about, and just maybe spend a few minutes on this actually, is at the Kenai Historical Society meeting this last weekend, there was discussion about actually some interior things over at Old Town, the cabins and all that, and getting people there, and they're kind of lost finding their way around, and it was just mentioned that there's really no sign directing people to Old Town. We happen to have two people here that are active in Old Town, live there and whatnot, but I couldn't believe it. So I looked outside of the visitor center, and certainly there's, you know, any town you go to, you know, if it has an old town or a city core or something like that, there's a sign. You know, historic area that way, Old Town or something. There is nothing directing us anyone that way. And I think there absolutely needs to be. I did mention that to city manager, and I think he's agreeable to that. But I think it's something that we need to move forward on, and it could either be like a brown sign, you know, like for a park or whatever, that's hanging on a stoplight, which I'd prefer, I think, because it's right there in front of you when you're coming through, and then it gets people directed into Old Town. Or there could be a sign along the right-of-way. Actually, they're all over the place in Kenai. Those big brown signs, you know, here's the golf course and all that. But there's nothing to Old Town. And as I recall from our comprehensive plan, you know, we need to get build up Old Town and all that. People need to go there. Well, we're not even directing them there. So hopefully we're going to get something in that direction. But you know, once you send people in there, talking to the guy that does the cabins, he said these people are still confused once they find their way in there, and they've got the little map, the cartoon map, if you will, of where to go, and they're looking for the cabins, and he's got pictures of them. He said he's going to send me confused tourists, and I've been a confused tourist too, so that's still going to happen. But he said he goes out and he tries to direct them in, and by that time they're very polite. They're already a little bit upset because they're kind of lost and all of that, and he gets them in there, and that's really not a good way to have a new visitor and all that. So perhaps we need to send them in that direction and then have some kind of nice little signs that direct to, you know, pottery or art, to you know, the cabins, even to the church and the rectory and all that kind of stuff, and other things like that. So they're not in the Leaf Hansen Memorial Park once they get in there. So you know, the more I thought about it, I guess I'm obviously getting kind of passionate about it here. But it just surprises me that we've never done it. And I think we ought to discuss it. And I think the city manager, and he might have some comments here, is going to be looking into it, and he probably is. And what I like to do or have on our next meeting is just a discussion item about it, so we can discuss it and go from there, and then we can find out some of the things you're finding out, and it's going to involve DOT to some degree. They've got the right-of-way there, so anyway, I'll kind of leave it at that. But if we could get that on the next meeting, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Well, first of all, I want to thank all of you for, you know, giving me the position of being vice mayor. I'm looking forward to supporting Mayor Gabriel as needed, and hopefully to the extent that Vice Mayor Navarre did for the past 3 years, who, you know, I agree with you, did a really fantastic job representing the city, a lot of time and effort, and that's appreciated. Also, I wanted to commend the city clerk on her reading of the consent agenda tonight for the first time. That was really good. And you know, people do come here and they don't really know what it is, and they asterisk or whatever. And I especially like the part where you were saying, even though it's not printed there, you know, what of the ordinances for introduction, when they're going to be heard for public hearing. That was a really good thing. I like that very much. I kind of you know, feel similar to Councilmember Naxted regarding the Planning and Zoning Commission. It's a really thoughtful, deliberative body, a good group of people that serve our city as commissioners with a really good liaison. Ms. Appleby, our planner, they have excellent meetings. I think you're going to really enjoy working with them. You know, I know I'm going to miss working with them, but I'm looking forward to working with Mr. Frades and the Park and Recreation Commission, and definitely. Also, I received some information about a session that's going to be held as in the planning stages for AML Friday, November 22nd. I'm not going to be able to be at that because I'm going to be at an earlier part of it. I'm just going to you know, present the information in case some of our other council members, you know, are interested. The UAA and the Municipality of Anchorage are organizing a climate action planning session at AML for Friday, November 22nd from 1 to 3. The draft agenda includes a presentation on the Anchorage Climate Change and Climate Action Plan and a sharing of the Climate Action Plan Toolkit and cohort conversation piece, and facilitating a group discussion about it, and possibly even center solar tour depending on weather. And so they're working on developing that. And I was at the, you know, the borough assembly meeting last night too, where they had a discussion on the comprehensive plan, and they passed the comprehensive plan for the borough last night, and there's a, you know, a section there that has to do with climate action planning for the borough, and I haven't read that yet, so that's been posted to the website though, and is available to be downloaded. And I appreciate the comments of people that came tonight and talked to us during unscheduled public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Peterkin.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I'm gonna take off from Henry here. I don't wanna let too much information out, because Paul and I have promised to be a little bit careful with this, but there's a new business family coming into Old Town. It's very exciting, that has a lot of plans. And if anyone wants to talk to Annette Villa, she'd be a good one to visit with about it. But it's gonna be very exciting, and I think it'll help rejuvenate that area, and I'll bet she'll be very supportive of some of the signage ideas and helping us with a lot of things, because that lady has a lot of energy. But Scott, all of you guys, thank you. Great job. Jamie, great job. Mr. Castmore, I'm not sure how you got looped into the planning business from IT, but you did an excellent job. I enjoyed looking through it the last couple days. Good job, and thank all of you guys. Thanks a lot. I won't be present at the next meeting. I'll try to call in and be out of state, so thanks.
Thanks. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, congratulations to Vice Mayor Malloy. Long time coming, well deserved, and you serve the community very well, and we rely on your point of view and expertise, and throughout the years you've informed my opinion greatly, and thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Jim.
I too was at the fundraiser for the Cancer Society, and some of us are cancer survivors. All of us have been touched by cancer, and it's something that it's not even a dinner table conversation. We don't talk about it. We know about it. We reflect upon it in our private moments. But to have such a positive public outreach, outpouring of thoughts, positive, inspirational thoughts, and actually funds for this type of thing, actually was very, very uplifting. It was time well spent. I too attended the retirement parties for those who recently have left us, and there's deep commitment and energy that will be lost. Hopefully we'll be able to replace it. Both individuals were very, very dynamic in their roles, and we have successful programs because of them and other individuals like them. Just chiming in a little bit on what Marion said and Councilor Naxted. There's a feeling that our Old Town is a kind of a family heirloom that's maybe off on the dusty shelf or locked away in a cedar chest, but it's something that's revealing itself now as something that brings not only tourists but community interest to our town, and it's indeed a focal point for our town, and we just have to figure out how to exploit it. There's old merchants buildings and stuff that are being repurposed. When we get the bluff erosion concept secured, and we know it will be successful, I might be taking a dirt nap before that finally happens, but it'll give inspiration to well, just do the math, and I'll gladly smile from somewhere and say good job. We have many opportunities here in this town that are unique to our society. I mean, people have been living here for thousands of years, and the mouth of the river and the bluffs around it have sustained humans for many thousands of years, and hopefully will be so in the future. I'm looking forward to a good year, and my engagement with the Council on Aging is, maybe other than taking care of my mom in her declining years, is probably one of the more useful things I've done here since my retirement from the slope. So thank you for your kind words and thoughts, and sometimes I'm a little gruff, but I'm really a softie inside. So here we go. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Petty.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to extend my thanks to Mr. Navarre for being such a wonderful vice mayor, and I appreciate his insight and leadership, and I look forward to having the opportunity to serve under Vice Mayor Bob Malloy. So congratulations. I had the privilege to also attend the event for Relay for Life. It was par excellent, and it will be a stellar opportunity for our community, and it is very wonderful to see the generosity of the community that we live in. And so thank you, Ms. Beach, for being so instrumental in making such a wonderful, successful event. Also, I wanted to thank City Manager, Mr. Ostrander, for his proactiveness for the police department and recognizing the importance of the safety of our community. And thank you for being proactive for making sure that we have very well-trained law enforcement officers in our community. So thank you for doing that. So that ends my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Navarre.
Thank you. I too attended Mary Jo's retirement, and again, the community was lucky to have her, and the service that she provided. I also have to, it takes a lot for city employees, if you ask me, to really commit to some of the things, and for them to have got the costumes from our clerk to our HR person to our attorney, I think came as Tweedledum, and the city manager came as the Mad Hatter, and so on and so forth. It was fun, and it was entertaining, and it was appropriate. And so I thank them for going outside the box and going the extra step. I also attended the American Cancer Society event, and I believe they raised well over $30,000 or someplace in that neighborhood net. And that just shows, especially for this first event and for the commitment by the our Twin Cities area to come together and make a difference in what's going to be available for cancer patients. Helping them with dealing with the disease as they have it, and keep a positive outlook. And there is a lot of success stories that are happening, and like was said at the event, one day they hope to not have to meet and have this fundraiser because there'll be a cure for cancer, and people won't be struggling. I want to remind everybody, AML's annual conference is from the 18th to the 22nd. As you know, it's the end of my year, and this is my conference as president. As I've stated to you through numerous times, I had a busy year, from having a meeting with the president in the White House to going to Pelosi's office in Washington DC to regional meetings for presidents and executive directors. That is very helpful and beneficial, and then our number of conferences, both the summer conference that was held here on the peninsula and the legislative conference that was held in Juneau, and an additional board meeting because the legislature was still meeting in our May meeting, so we met in Juneau again so that we could continue to advocate for municipalities and the impacts of what the budget means to those communities. And so I thank you for allowing me way back then. I know there's a commitment by the city to support a person that runs through the chairs, and but it's coming to an end at this. I'll still be the immediate past president and will still serve on the board, but it was a very enlightening and worthwhile opportunity, and I think I served our city and our state in that position very well. As far as in my ending comments, well, before I do that, I especially want to just thank again, and Marion, thank you for coming so many times and updating us and making sure we hear about and the public hears about our arts in our community and the Peninsula Art Guild and at the Kenai Fine Arts Center. The importance and the things that you're doing with the remodel and all the other things to make our community have that quality of life and not miss that opportunity, and for the youth and other people that have that opportunity, I'm just amazed at how you continue and the group continues to make our community a better place to live and play and draw and mold and whatever else you do. So thank you. And again, the vice mayor position, I believe, as I stated when I took it on, that everybody should have an opportunity as you go through and you're able to serve the time and you're here and you can take over for the mayor if necessary and serve in his stead in a public venue if he can attend. And I always, in all cases, reference the council as a whole and the mayor whenever I represented the city, and I know that Bob will do the same. And the city, it's not a, just so the public knows, it's not a position of power or that, it's a position of responsibility. And I think anybody that serves in that position takes that responsibility seriously, and as they should. With that, that'll end my comments for tonight, since you didn't support any of my amendments earlier.
Thank you, Councilor Navarre. We have no executive session scheduled and no pending items. Seeing no other business before this body, we are adjourned.
On the